ways and means. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Is there anybody here for public participation? I don't see any, so we'll move on. The first up is the Historical Commission, 691.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess I got to do this alone. Yeah, I brought my support group today.
So we've got a budget running a little bit late here, but when Megan and I met with the president of the Historical Commission, Joyce Fay, that it was kind of so there was a timing issue, I guess I'll say. When the budget was originally submitted, there was a focus for all of the materials and supplies money was going to be put toward creating a new website. Well, after the budget had been submitted, a Burlington resident, Jonathan Sachs, actually put together a website for for the Historical Commission, and if you have your laptop with you this evening, you can take a look at the nice job that he did. So Megan and I, as a subcommittee, were just wondering, you know, here's all this money for something planned for next year for something that had already been done. So we asked the commission to clear up the issue, and they have resubmitted a budget that makes more sense to us. There's a little bit of money toward creation and maintenance of their webpage, and but otherwise the budget made more sense to us. I will let Joyce fill in and answer questions of what the commission will be up to this coming year, but the bottom line is that the request for this year is $9,620, which is $5 less than last year, so a bit less than level funded. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Thanks, Brad. Joyce, welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. Joyce Fay, Chairman and Treasurer of the Commission. And we have tonight Peter Campola, Mary Nolte, and Kathy Horton with us. So, thank you.
Would you like to add anything to Brad's report?
No, I don't think so. Unless you want me to explain some of the different items.
I'll open it up for questions then.
Okay.
Any questions? Oh, Roger.
A little off topic, but I'm curious as to the construction that's going on in the museum.
Oh,
How that's going.
well, it's going. They have completed putting in the lift. Right now, I think what has to be done is the inside carpentry work around the lift now. So we're waiting. We're waiting for that to be done, but the other part, and then I don't know what happens after that. So, I mean, you might be able to check with Paul or somebody else that's here. I don't know, Paul, do you know anything more about the lift?
Joyce, I don't know much more than your update in terms of the interior stuff being finished. I just want to point out that because of the cost of the project was so large, that a lot of the work was done in-house by the DPW facilities department. So they did saved the town a few dollars there.
Right. Now, will somebody have to inspect that also?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Elevators don't get put in service without.
No, I
without
didn't think so.
inspections.
But I haven't, I didn't know that. Yeah, no, yeah.
Thank you. It's good to hear that it's come
It
down to the
is, and
finish.
we're really anxious to use it because I think that it will be an asset for all of us to be able to use and for the public also too, so.
Have normal hours resumed? Do you have?
No, we haven't because we had to move everything around and cover it up, and all that stuff has just been in the same position it's been there for, while they've been working on the lift. So we can't do much until it gets finished, and then we can put things back to how it was before, and then hopefully for the summer, I hope that we can have some normal hours and have people come in, yes. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Was there a question over here? Okay,
Move to approve?
thank you.
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes?
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Tanya? She's not there. Mike?
Yes.
Bill? He's not here either. Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, that's 12-0. Do we want to take the shed warrant article?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We attempted, subcommittee attempted to talk about the historical shed today. There was a scheduling conflict, and so we weren't able to do that. There is quite a bit in the backup on the shed. I asked Steve whether we should delay the review of this article until next week, but he decided that next week there'd be enough going on with schools. So there is no subcommittee recommendation one way or the other, but we'll turn the floor over to the presentation and what's being requested.
No, you need the mic?
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, again, Peter Capola, a Historical Commission member. This shed request goes back to 2016 when then Town Administrator approached then Chairman Mike Trudeau about the historical items that were in storage at the Clark and Reed site. And we requested that maybe they could just create an area within the new DPW facility for us to store these items. And he decided that he would rather have us have a shed. And I don't remember, I think a warrant was put out, and we met, Mike Trudeau and I met with the Ways and Means at that time, and we said that the shed was too small for the amount of items that we had. And I don't know if there's anybody who was on Ways and Means back then. I remember the conversation. But they had too many questions about it and felt that it was submitted too quickly, and where we did not have much input on it, they recommended that the warrant be pulled, which they did, and they also tasked Mike and I to come up with some other way of doing this, including looking for grants. So we did do that exercise, and we as a commission determined that a great idea would be where they wanted to put the shed behind the West School, have that shed look like an historic building that was in town, which is the blacksmith shop that was out here in the corner of Center and Bedford Street. It fits in with it fits in with the neighborhood. It's smaller than the two ranch houses that would be on either side of it, and it would sit lower behind the West School, and it would allow us to take all of the school items that are in the museum, bring them over there, as well as all of the other historic items that are currently now in an ISO container up at Overlook. We can put many of the items that are in storage and at the museum on display in the shed, while at the same time having enough storage area for the other items, and that then frees up the entire museum floor for more and better exhibits than we have right now. We're the first ones to admit that the museum floor is cluttered. There's just too many things in there, and you kind of lose the story that we have in there, which takes you to a timeline of Burlington dating back to the Native American period all the way through the 1960s. So by removing items from there, putting them on display, behind the West School in the shed, we do a much better job of putting our displays together at the museum. So that's what the whole purpose of the shed is, to allow us to, put things in storage and clean the museum floor up.
Thank you. Is there questions from the committee? John?
Yeah, I'll admit I always worry about storage things. It kind of reminds me of, people with their houses putting things in a storage pod. But I think as Mr. Monaco pointed out last week, this would seem to be a pretty ideal application for a CPA, assuming that goes through. My inclination would be to delay doing this until, if and when CPA passes, and have it be funded via that mechanism, since there'll be a lot of money going into that fund at that time.
Well, I won't argue with that, but I will point out that every year since 2016, the warrant's either been pulled for a number of reasons, and we've said, okay, we agreed with that, but it doesn't stop us from still receiving historical items that we continue to put in storage. And like you said, there is no guarantee that the CPA will be approved, and even if it did get approved, now we're still talking another year or so before the funds are released to us, so we're talking 2 years out. So that would now be 8 years since the start of the project.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your dilemma with time. So if we will know whether or not the town in a general vote supports the Community Preservation Act in November. And if it doesn't, then certainly at the next opportunity, you'll know that's just not available, and you're back to needing to get essentially free cash, which I'm pretty sure would still have enough a year from now. But if it is approved, it would be 2024 before you would get the recommendation and the vote of town meeting if the project was agreed to as one of the projects by the committee. But I would say that the committee should reflect looking favorably on this kind of a thing, because that's what CPA is for. I would think you would have a real good shot at it. So if it exists, I would say you've got a really good shot at the money for 2024. And if it isn't going to happen because it doesn't pass, you'll know by November. So at that point, we would have to reconsider, and free cash isn't going anywhere. So, I think it's a really good use of the CPA, and it's a way to protect our free cash, which we otherwise can't do if we spend it this way. So, and right now, I'm a little bit concerned about that. That's why I would lean towards that. But I understand it's another delay, but it's a delay with a purpose, as opposed to, come back later. It's, let's see if we can get that funded that way. And I would think, I personally would support it at town meeting as a CPA project. It's ideal for that. So that's where I would lean with this one.
Roger, and then Doug.
Couple of questions. So in the storage in the shed, what kind of climate control is needed for the things that you're going to store there? Humidity, heat?
No, there won't be any of that requirement. These are things like a plumber's site job box, which is about the size of this table. Doesn't require any humidity control, environmental controls. The only items we have that do have that requirement are on the floor of the museum. But we
Which
don't.
we don't have anyway.
But we don't have any items, and there wouldn't be anything going into the shed or into the storage part of the shed that we would require any kind of climate control.
All right, I guess I was thinking of things that would rust. Which,
Well, they're already rusty.
oh, so they've got a nice patina of oxidized iron.
They kind of look like this right now.
At least preserve the level of rust they have.
I think 33,000 is almost nothing compared to the budget, and so I think I would support going ahead with this. Yes, it's a good money used for CPA money, but, it's relatively small. I think the getting the museum back to the point where they can show things well and getting things reorganized well so the public can enjoy them is more than important than waiting 2 years for $33,000.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and I forgot to mention it. 2024 will be the town's 25th anniversary. It won't be a big celebration, but it will still be a milestone year. So we really wanted to try to have the museum cleaned up and presentable that year for the public. And again, the only way to do that is to move other things into storage. And the only thing, if we don't get the shed, we're looking at probably another ISO container. And I don't know how much that costs to rent.
Doug?
Couple of things. So I'm in favor of the shed in the long run. My question, when we talked about CPA last week, if it passes in November, it's kind of an automatic $250,000 toward the historical preservation annually. True?
Because it's a 10%.
It's one
There's
of
a
the-
10% minimum for the 3 categories that they had.
So that's the minimum it would get, is $250,000. Okay, so that's a lot of money. So theoretically, by 2024, you're gonna have $250,000 a year to spend. Can we pass this? I mean, like last year through COVID, we passed some things to say, if something doesn't happen, then in January, so you won't move forward until we know in November? Is that,
Why not just wait till January town meeting then?
Right.
oh yeah, that's fine. Because we don't usually, yeah.
And we don't have a mechanism to say that to approve this. for
Well,
January.
in the past, we've had kind of a,
Yeah.
gentle person's agreement that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that's the point. The fact that we'll know in November if the town supports the Preservation Act at all is pivotal, because if it does, then yes, but, you all make a really good point. It would be 2024 before they'd have enough money to build it, which is still a bit of a problem, even if it were passed. And I'm assuming there's no way, this might be one for the administration, there's no way we can reverse
Have them pay.
reverse fund from CPA something that was approved with a warrant a year ahead of time.
Seems unlikely.
Because we could get a long list for that.
Retroactive.
Paul?
I think it is possible, it'll be a little tricky though. It'd be like a negative appropriation at town meeting, I believe, so to be the mechanism that would do that.
And we would also have to work through the newly formed committee, which still has yet to be formed, so we don't know how that body's going to be made up or what their priorities are going to be.
I had a quick question. I'm just curious why you're saying 2024. The election would be in November
Yeah,
of this year.
There's this
And
schedule.
Bill Boyden gave us that updated schedule.
I don't know if
Okay, all right.
did you see that? I mean,
So if it's
Yeah.
approved in November,
it's got a whole bunch
it
of,
still has to convene. and
Okay, there's a
more-
process.
More
Okay.
legislative type policy to put in place in the committee.
yeah.
Approval.
Assume
I think we have to go through
regular town meetings with a
Got it.
regular cadence of a committee formed, then the committee collects input from the public for projects, then they traverse all the projects and make the top recommendations. The most likely, by the normal passage of time that you'd have the recommendation on the floor, would be May of 2024, funded, fully funded. If we wanted to do something sooner, that's why I brought up this notion of negative cash flow, but theoretically, we could deal with all of this in January, because we'll know in November if it's passing or not. Would you mind doing that, Paul?
So,
Budget.
crazy idea, suppose you bond it, and then when the CPA is approved, it pays off the bond.
I doubt it's eligible, but it's
Yeah.
up to him.
All right.
I think if there's a mechanism, even if there isn't a mechanism, I'd be in favor of doing it now, so that it's ready in 2024 for the anniversary.
Yeah.
Brad?
So I had 3 questions. Is $33,000 enough? I mean, where did the estimate come from?
I priced it out as doing a traditional 1800 balloon-type framing using rough sawn wood, and I priced it out using modern constructions, current prices at Lowe's. And the footing, it came to $22,000 and change. just for materials. The rest of it would be labor. Most of it volunteer labor, our Burlington contractors, and maybe the tech school.
And so you segued into my next question. Are there any constraints on how we're allowed to build this? I mean, is this town land? Are there union constraints?
It's
or-
town-owned land. The property is pie-shaped. So it goes from its widest width at the corner of Bedford Street and Francis Wyman, it tapers down. And immediately behind the school, there is enough width so that you're staying within the setbacks. So it's fully compliant with zoning in terms of, so there would not be any special permits. There's no wetlands involved. It's a simple getting a building permit and constructing.
And so you answered my third question. I was going to say, if there was an issue with the permitting, is there a plan B? But it sounds like you guys have done that research.
Yeah, I took advantage of my 20 years in the planning board to
Roger?
One more follow-up.
Very good, thank
So I
you.
know that residential sheds, by right, there's a shed up to some size without a permit. This looks to me to be bigger than that.
Yeah, we checked with the previous building inspector, and he gave us a thumbs up on it. So you're allowed to have a shed, and this is a shed that will have incidental usage as a display, but it is primary use is a shed. So as such, a shed is authorized on residential property.
David?
Have the neighbors been contacted or any input from the neighbors on this? Again, the location is a very difficult location. I know people do visit the West School, but again, from a parking standpoint, from an activity standpoint, and now you're gonna have a lot more activity if it is open for viewings, while people are visiting the West School, going around back, and there's gonna be.
Yeah, there'll be no vehicles. They're gonna have to park, like everybody does, they park over at the church parking lot, and they walk across the street. The only time there is a vehicle there is when the third graders come in, and they park the bus there. The neighbor on the Francis Wyman's roadside just moved in there a few months ago. We don't know who they are. The neighbor on the other side, the previous chairman had some conversation. We're not really sure, but we think there may be some encroachment. And so that's one of the things that we'll have to do is a survey to see whose driveways are on whose parcels of land. But no, since then, there's been no conversation with the neighbors.
And I haven't seen all the inventory, but it sounds like you're still getting a lot of artifacts. So these are
It's not
historical things that you're purchasing or not
No, we
purchasing,
don't
but
purchase.
getting donated.
We've,
And it's a
23
lot of
Church
it.
Lane, we found this. This is an early 1800s handmade handle. This was in the basement of 23 Church Lane. Sometimes we see something like, we did pick up a 1880s vanity commode, which is in your bedroom. There would be the basin and the pitcher so you can shave and everything.
Yeah.
That's out for restoration. That's a good size, but we don't usually get things that big. It's usually stuff like this. But when we emptied out the Grandview Farm 30-something years ago, a lot of what we have in storage is still from the barn, and those are very big items. Big wooden barrels, a muck wagon, a hay cutter, Hirschman hay cutter, things like that. So those are the things that are in storage. We don't get large items like that that often.
So are all of those currently in storage at the Historical Commission at the corner of Center Street? No. Where are they currently stored?
We have the ISO container up at Overlook has all of the items that came out of the Grandview Farm, plus some items that we picked up over the years that were put in storage at Clark and Reed. All of those are currently at the ISO container in the Overlook. We have items, the basement is full of items. And there are some items in my shed. There are some items in the shed at the community garden complex. There are some items on my front porch. But we're talking, again, bow saws, rakes, We're not talking very large items, it's just a bunch of little things.
Okay.
And again, once everything is cleaned up, we'll be able to this will go in with the hammer collection. It'll be a box full of hammers. But, Burlington history.
I would move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. David?
No.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
No.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Phil? Phil's not here. Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
No.
And the chair will vote aye. That's 11-3. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Save that hammer.
Good luck with the
You're gonna
construction.
need it.
New gavel.
Got a bigger one next time.
Mine's not loud enough. So let's move on to the public safety. So we'll start with Article 16. Article 16 is withdrawn, correct? That's the transfer from receipts reserved account.
Withdrawn? I think we're waiting on contract negotiations to determine that.
Okay. So then the next thing would be the Phase 2 communication plan. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So Megan and I met with Chief Patterson on Friday to talk about this. And the subcommittee approved this warrant 2-0. I just checked today to see if the backup was up on our Ways and Means website, and it wasn't, so I sent out an email. Did people get a chance to look at that at all?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, okay, I'll go over it. So, this is the Public Safety Communications Equipment Upgrade Phase 2. We voted and town meeting approved Phase 1 of the project last year. Phase 1 cost $1.24 million. Phase 2 is slated for $700,000. The piece of this, so this is actually going to benefit police, fire, and DPW, so it's not purely a fire warrant. And basically, we're replacing, I don't know if you recall from last year, but we're replacing the kind of communications infrastructure in the town when police, fire, DPW communicate through their radio sets. They need to bounce that off of antennas around town. And that communication infrastructure is 30 years old, and there are problems with it. We talked about last year, and it becomes a safety concern because you could have the police not being able to communicate in certain parts of town, the fire department, fighting a fire, and the chief can't communicate with them in certain parts of the town. I think there was a weak spot in Burlington Road area where that was a problem with the chief trying to coordinate the fire in that location. So, so that Phase 1 was approved and is going forward currently. I believe the equipment has been purchased, and the deployment of that will be happening soon. Phase 2 is a continuation of that project. So let me just cover this quickly. Phase 1 handled Channel 1. So police and fire both have multiple channels that they communicate on. Channel 1 is for the police, and fire has a separate, that's their main communication channel. So that piece has been put in place, or will be put in place in Phase 1. In addition, we're going from 1 antenna in town to 4 antennas in town as part of Phase 1. Yep, upgrading radio communication equipment in the police and fire dispatch centers are also part of Phase 1. If we look at Phase 2 now, that includes additional channels, Channel 2 for the police and Channel 2 for the fire. Police Channel 2 is a tactical operations channel. Fire Channel 2 is a fire ground channel. Chief can explain those more if you need to know that. There will also be 3 additional receivers as part of Phase 2 located throughout the town at Charles River, which is the Bay Bank by the mall, the Keurig building, and up on Network Drive. Also included is upgrades to the police and fire PA systems located in the dispatch centers. And that's kind of the main pieces. So once we get through Phase 2, we'll then go into Phase 3, most likely next year, which is going to be replacing all the police and fire mobile radios. So again, 3-phase project. Phase 3 will be an additional $700,000. But especially because this is, part of the project the town has already approved, it kind of continues the revamping of the infrastructure for that. I think it's important that it goes forward.
Thanks, Mike. Chief, would you like to add anything to Mike's report?
I mean, Mike did a great job summing up the request. I'm certainly open to any type of questions.
Just from a Phase 1 perspective, when does that get completed?
Sure. So right now, as Mike said, all Phase 1 equipment has been ordered. The dispatch consoles are actually in what they call staging. So they're in our vendors' quarters where they're being programmed as we speak. We're hoping to send police and fire dispatch personnel to our vendor within the next few weeks so they can assist in programming the dispatch consoles. And the dispatch consoles, what they are is just big monitors, touchscreen type monitors. The repeater infrastructure has been ordered, and our vendor is estimating a June delivery date.
Are you seeing a lot of delays due to supply side?
I mean, just about in every walk of life, we're seeing delays in supplies, yes.
Okay. Questions? Brad?
So no issues with the project itself. I'm just curious, and maybe this is a question for Town Hall 1 or the administration, why the choice to pay this out of free cash versus bonding? Just that's how the pieces fit together?
All.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think every year we try to identify warrant articles that we would typically borrow for, but that we want to keep off of the bonding schedule, and we try to take care of those with free cash, and that's what we selected on this one.
And last year's 1.2?
1.2, I believe we set it up as a borrow, but our intention is within the debt schedule to pay it down, so to keep it off the long-term debt schedule.
Very good, thank you.
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, so, in talking about the police and fire PA systems, are these physical systems within the building, or are we talking actual systems that they're using?
So it's actually it's PA systems in both fire headquarters and police headquarters. It's not just a simple PA system. because it's integrated with the dispatch console itself, so.
So that brings my second question. So I think one of the things we know, we're hoping eventually we're gonna get a new police station, or at least that's the hope of the town. Will this system be able to transfer into the new building, or we would need to get a new system for the new building?
So that's one of the things we first asked when we started this project, and the answer to that is yes. All equipment can be moved into one central location.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes?
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Sonia? Sonia?
Yes.
Thank you. Mike,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob, John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, 14-0. The next is 706, which is the fire police record management and dispatch system. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, again, Megan and I met with Chief Brown and Assistant Chief Kirschner on Friday to talk about the next three warrants. For Article 7.6, subcommittee voted 2-0 to support this. This article is, it's not, obviously not part of the last one, the communication infrastructure, but it's sort of related where it's upgrading communication capabilities, kind of system capabilities for police and fire. So you might kind of think of them sort of going together in that sense. What this is it's for computer-aided dispatch and a record management system for both the police and fire stations. And as noted in the kind of the project description, in some cases, it's upgrading capabilities, improving capabilities within the police department, and then there are pieces going in for the fire department that are brand new functionality that the fire department doesn't have today. So there was kind of a gap in terms of fire and some of their systems and so forth. So it addresses kind of both levels within those departments. So let's see. The other thing, as noted in the purpose, it's going to allow for, upgrades in record management and computer-aided dispatch. The systems today are old or not present. It also allows fire and police to sort of work together in a more unified manner. And I'll kind of look now at the memorandum that was up on our webpage here, kind of step through that. But as noted, this is the police and fire working together to bring the infrastructure up to date with this record management and computer-aided dispatch software. The police did kind of a review of their systems, and it's noted on there the various kind of benefits. I believe the chief kind of boiled it down into three main areas. The record management system is going to provide a lot of help in the areas of police reform. So there are certain things that are going on now with police and police reform in terms of capabilities. The record management system is going to allow them to have much better records and capabilities to provide that level of reform. Also, it's going to bring a lot of things that are currently managed by separate systems within police together under one system. And it's going to give new capabilities in case management, so police case management, property and evidence. I believe property and evidence, I don't even think you have a system really today for that. Is that right, Chief?
We do have a system for it,
Yep.
but because it's such a high liability one, we need to bring it up to date.
Okay. All right, so many different benefits there. On the fire side, fire department has no computer-aided dispatch or record management system in place. And Chief Patterson showed Megan and I some of the processes today, which are kind of literally writing things down on a piece of paper when calls come in. So there's obviously no good way to have history or tracking of that. So that's a tremendous improvement that will happen there. And in addition, when police and fire go out on calls, this system will provide a lot more information to the policemen and firemen that are going out on the calls. So if a call comes in for police, they're going to go out to their cruisers, or maybe they're already in their cruisers. The system's going to pull up a lot more information and history to, let's say, the location that they're going to than they have today. Fire doesn't have any of that information, so they can't tell, like, historically what's happened, what's been in place at this particular location. Maybe there's some type of chemicals or something like that that would be nice to know. They don't have any of that information, but the system will provide that. It will also provide kind of a cross-working capability between police and fire so that they can share information on calls that they're going to perhaps jointly, or maybe the police have gone on one call and they've noted certain information. Fire can take advantage of that, and if they have a call later to that location. So a lot of great capabilities there. Also, it kind of brings together the potential for like a joint kind of dispatch operation between police and fire, because now they'll be utilizing the same system, so that is going to be easier to do if we decide to go that route in the future. Other things here, like alerts, hazmat alerts, violent offender information, that type of thing will be part of the system. Police, the policy and procedure manuals can be stored in this, and this was one of the articles last year that fire actually withdrew, was regarding policy, keeping a policy, storing a policy, so that kind of fills a gap that they didn't have as well. Let me flip the last page here. And there's some new capabilities in terms of some access into the system from citizens who can report certain things in through a portal and even through mobile access. So if they're maybe observing something in town, they can kind of log that information, send pictures in, that type of thing. So there's even a citizen component of this. So yeah, those are the benefits, and again, we supported this 2-0.
Thanks, Mike. Chief Brown, Chief Patterson, would you like to add anything to that report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I put a lot in the backup, and I know it's a lot to absorb. I'm happy to answer any questions, but Mike hit on all the high points that I would hit on, but I'm, certainly able to go into more detail if you require it.
Questions from the committee? Roger?
John's hand was up first, but
Well, John can go later. He has a lot of
I
questions.
know, he always does. Yes.
Happy to be last.
So a couple of things. So sounds like a great idea. The database has a bunch of information about geographic information. Does it have the ability to tap into the other GIS system and the building department's information, building department's database of, as-built buildings? Is there a way to cross-link them so that if you need that, you can get to it easily?
So my understanding, the mapping would be able to do that. Whether or not it can go and pull in other records, I'm not sure, but the mapping capability is there.
Okay, great.
We could also pull information from the assessor's office as well.
Yeah, yes. However they want to link it. I mean, personally, I wouldn't duplicate information, but that's technology for you. I'm assuming, what kind of vendors, this will be a RFP, right? And there'll be different vendors?
This would be purchased off the state bid.
Okay, so there is such a system that is known to the state bid?
Yes, there is.
Okay. A bunch of this information sounds like it's somewhat sensitive. Is it all access controlled, by individual employees?
So it is access controlled through employees, through passwords, and then there are different user levels as well. So administration in my building would have the highest access, and then down through the different personnel in the station, you can limit the access.
And then in the eventuality that body cameras show up in the police force, I don't know where else they would show up, is that information linkable into the same infrastructure?
Yes, so actually, the way this system works, if you had video evidence, photographic evidence, et cetera, you can actually download it into the system, and it will upload into the report.
Okay, great. I have no idea whether, $439,000 is enough money for this, but I'll take your word for it. Sounds good.
You just offered you more money.
I'll take
Rare.
Well, there's always that, right?
Almost.
I look forward to seeing a demonstration.
Thank you.
Yeah, what is the timeline for the training once implementation? Because I'm sure you're gonna need to get everyone on board relatively quickly, but it's gonna be hard with people who are both on and off duty.
So if the project was approved, and let's say they were able to start in July, it would take them a few months to do the data mining of all the information that's already in our current system, pull it over into the new one. I believe the estimate was about 4 months, depending on how many property records we have. And then once we're ready at that point with all the data to go live, then they would begin the training for a couple of weeks until everybody's training. And then when they, in fact, go live, throw the switch, so to speak, there would be some of their personnel on scene for up to 48 hours to make sure that any glitches were taken care of with our end users.
Then my other question is, so it sounds like you're gonna be able to store information on addresses, on things that may be helpful to show up on scene, getting multiple, maybe ambulance calls to the same address, keeping that stuff. Where does the privacy come into place? So for example, I buy a house on, and now there's someone else's information is now stored for us, you show up on the scene, and you're not getting the right information. So where's the privacy oversight, or where does citizens, do they have the ability to say, hey, can I check my address and see what's being stored?
So, yes, there's dual ability there. There is a customer service portal, I'll call it the back end of this system, where any resident of Burlington can get onto the system, and they can update information. So let's say, for instance, somebody wanted to go on vacation for a couple of weeks, they want us to do house checks. They can let us know that. If a house sells, they can get on there and say, for instance, we just purchased this house, could you please wipe the records clean? And then we'll have somebody assigned to that automatically that can handle that. And the same would be for the fire side as well.
Those would all be administrative changes for approvals, correct?
Correct.
Okay, John?
Thank you. Yes, you correctly assessed. I have a few questions. It sounds like a good idea. I just want to understand the kinds of records that are being stored in this. I'm imagining it's like all calls coming in, all dispatching to various sites. That's all logged in there?
So every dispatch that police goes to, I can't necessarily speak for fire, every call that we enter into the system is maintained. But if a call generates any type of report, whether it's an offense report, an arrest report, a use of force report, that is also loaded into the system as well. So we maintain all of that electronically.
Okay. Is there any plan to add in past information, or is this just a going forward?
No, this would take in all the past information, and that's why it would be about a 4-month window from the time we're approved till the time it goes online, because they need to call it data mining, pull everything over
So
into
you'll transfer all the records from the old police system. And is there any plan to take the fire paper records and have that be input, or?
So we actually have a incident reporting system that we use at the fire, so we'll be able to download that all into the new system.
Okay. Is that something the vendor takes care of, or is that something that somebody has to do in the department, or?
No, the vendor
No.
takes care of that.
Okay, and this is all indexed by address at least, I assume, so you can look it up, what happened at this address in the past.
Correct. And residents would also be able to go onto the back end of this and put in a search for an address, and be able to see crime maps and everything else that they want to see as well.
Is it indexed by name also, that, I can see, how often Roger's been arrested if I'm in the police department, or even if he moves?
No, so information that would be protected under Freedom of Information would be locked down, so.
No, I know, I could, the police could, and I know Roger's record is 0, by the way.
More than once this month.
Could the police look and see?
Oh, yes.
That, okay.
So fire wouldn't be able to go into that database.
And that's why I'm wondering, I know the police department has its own IT and is, isolated system, but part of the idea is that fire can see some of the police information. How does that work with the firewall in place?
So the system would be maintained over in the police department in separate servers over there. It would be maintained there. And then each person would have separate permissions. And they can set what permissions fire would be able to see on a call. So for instance, if we put something in as a hazard that the fire department needs to see for safety, they're gonna have access to that. But if it was a criminal record information, that would be blocked. And that would be set up by us along with the vendor when the system is being put into place.
Okay, so I understand there's privileges involved, but this means obviously it can't be on the isolated police network if it's at least partially accessible from outside the police department then, presumably, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the technical aspects of it.
Okay, that's part of the deal, though, they understand it.
Yes,
and fire needs access.
They do understand that.
Okay. And Mike said something that's very interesting. I just want to make sure it's really true. I'm sure it is. Last year we did have.
with the hammer.
Last year we did have the Warren article that was withdrawn on the fire department policies and having that would be automatically updated. And there was a whole training program associated with that people could take. And is that all that functionality included in this package also?
Yes.
Yes.
And is that true for both police and fire policies?
Yes.
Okay, so this completely supersedes any need that was there for that last year?
Correct.
All right, well, that's pretty cool.
Is that the same vendor, or is it a different vendor?
It's the same vendor.
It's the same vendor as last year?
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't know.
No,
who your
it's
vendor is.
not, no.
Okay.
And just one final question. And this is probably unanswerable, but I know this is listed as a 20-year life, but the current police system is only 13 years old and it's no longer usable because of various reasons that you listen to backup. How confident are we that this will really last 20 years and the company will be there and so forth? How long have they been around, I guess would be the question.
Well, I can tell you the company has assured us they will be around, but beyond that, I really can't answer.
How long have they been around so far?
They've been in operation for 19 years.
Okay, so far so good. Okay.
And I can tell you the Lexington Police and Fire have it on board. They're coming up to their 5-year anniversary with the system. And I spoke with the Lexington chief tonight, and he had high praise for the system and the support from the company. And they have not changed hands in the 5 years he's had it.
Very encouraging, thank you.
Rob and then Frank.
I was going to ask about what other towns have this kind of system and what problems have they had with it?
So right now, I have a list in Massachusetts. You've got Nantucket Police Department, you've got Hopkinton Police and Fire, Taunton Police and Fire, the Dedham Police Department, Braintree Police Department, Andover Police and Fire, Milton Police and Fire, North Attleboro Police and Fire, and then Lexington Police and Fire. When we've reached out to these individuals, and I haven't personally, but I have a sergeant that's done so and a lieutenant, and everything has come back high praise, which is why we went this direction.
Yeah, I've spoken to the Lexington Fire Chief on multiple occasions, and he's actually walked me through different modules of the system, and they're impressed and pleased with their move to that system.
The reason I asked it is because any kind of system implementation always has problems.
For sure.
It's not perfect, and I was wondering what kind of problems we could run into. That's why.
I mean, like any other software products, there's glitches, and I've been told that this company's very responsive to corrections and glitches.
Frank?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an interesting, opportunity for us. I'd say it's a pretty modern database, records keeping, and online retrieval system. What kind of annual support are you expecting to purchase from the vendor, just for annual updates and possibly training of new modules and that sort of thing? Is that in the cards here?
So there is an annual support and maintenance cost going forward. The first year is free.
That always is.
Right.
That's called a,
Second, in year 2 through 6, there are costs, and what it'll do, at least in my budget, is there are certain areas in the budget, for instance, our policy and procedure program and our internal affairs program. I wouldn't need those anymore, so I'm gonna have some built-in offsets going forward. There will be operational costs that would have to increase.
so you have a rough idea of their annual maintenance fee would be in years 2, 3, 4, just roughly?
Right between 35 and 40 grand, which would
Okay.
be split between police and fire. That's a rough estimate, is that?
Okay.
Yeah.
And you refer to glitches and startup problems and all that sort of thing, which there always are, but I think to some extent, I would expect that there's a certain amount of customization or fitting to our database. In other words, you can transfer over all the records you want, but if they don't fit into the indexing and keyword system and whatever, you gotta do some customization. Is that part of what's going on here?
Yes, that, they will customize. They customize to the specific jurisdiction or even multiple jurisdictions if they're in a regional area. So they will come in and work with both police and fire and customize.
Which makes the support, I think, really important. And are you looking at bringing it up kind of like in phases, where you just start off with basically replicating what you can do today, and then get into the integration of things and adding services? Have you got a phase-in strategy for this?
So I do. I would have to see it turned on first, but there are certain modules that I don't think we would need to turn on right away. For instance, the body camera, uploading body camera footage isn't an issue right now. Case management may not be an issue at this point in time. So you've got to walk before you can run type of thing.
Right.
Get the system up and going, get the end users comfortable. I am assured it's pretty easy, and our personnel at the police department are used to using these systems. Fire, maybe not. But I'm sure it'll be an easy transition for us, but there are certain things I would probably wait to turn on until a year or two down the road.
Okay, that
Same
sounds,
here.
sounds prudent.
I'd be looking to get the computer-aided dispatch function going. Obviously, our incident reporting system, we'd want to get that online right out of the gate.
Okay.
And then our inspections as well.
So I'm far from me to try to tell you how to do it. The reason I'm probing a little bit is because I would suspect, I would not be surprised if from a support point of view, in years, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you wanted more than what came with the $35,000 a year fee, the annual support fee. We should be open to that. I think there might be more to be gained from this by figuring out how to use it better and adapting it more and more to the way we operate. And as we integrate the dispatching services and information into a more unified way, that's going to require some splicing, I think, and learning. So the offset will help, but there's probably some additional costs that would come with this to maintain it on a year-on-year basis, I would guess. Thank you.
That was going to be my question. As we turn on the modules, does that increase the cost of the yearly?
That's why you get to go last.
Right. Roger?
Just one other quick one. I assume with any good software system, there's backup. Is there off-site backup, or is it just on-site?
It is cloud-based backup as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion approved.
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Sorry, Doug, yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Shia?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 14-0. Next article, 707, which is the network security updates for the police. Thanks, Chief Patterson.
So again, Megan and I met with Chief Brown on this Friday as well. We, subcommittee 2-0 in support. This one is, compared to the other ones, it's a kind of a fairly straightforward situation. Network data switch upgrades. There are I'll flip over to the memo that was up on the website. There are 3 Cisco switches of one model and 4 of another model that they use within their network in the police station. They are pretty old, and Chief attached a whole page here on kind of definition of end of life and end of support stuff. But the net of it is that these things have been out of support since 2017, 2018, which means you can't get patches, you can't get fixes. It's not supported. You know, potentially there could be a security issue that you can't address because it's been out of support for 4 years and they're not doing it anymore. So it, you know, to us, it was a fairly straightforward thing that, yes, this is old, out of support equipment. It's probably not optimized, you know, optimizing flow in the network as well. But just the fact that it's, you know, out of support made it kind of easy for us. So again, we supported it 2-0.
Thanks, Mike. Chief, would you like to add anything to the report?
Nothing to add. Again, happy to answer any questions. You've probably seen I don't have the technical prowess, but I will do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, here's our chance to grill the chief on the network security
And the
update.
deputy is here to back me up. So.
Awesome. Any questions, John?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll admit I was thank you. I was a little surprised that you have, it's like over 150 ports. It sounds like a lot of hardwired things for a police station. But I'll just assume that you've worked out the network infrastructure properly. The question I had was, it looks like about 4 years of security updates after end of life. Has an end of life date been specified for the new switches that you're ordering?
The new switches, the ones that we have put before you are a 5-year switch.
Are they on end of life already, or?
No, for the new ones here. So the ones that are in the system right now, I believe end of life was 2016.
Right, I understand
30th
that.
of 2016. The new ones, I'm not entirely sure. What we got was a 5-year estimated useful life.
Okay, so, all right, so if they haven't end of life them yet, there's
Yeah,
at
I don't
least
have
the
a
4 years
specific date,
plus
but
another one maybe.
5 years.
All right, good. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Rob?
I just want to clarify, network switches average 5 years. And that's when you should replace them, so that come 2027, we should see you here again. And not wait until 2032. Because it's really gets worse and worse and worse, and they could be attacked at any time.
So now that this has been identified, this will be going on to the town's IT refresh, so that I don't have to come back. I'll fall on the sword with this one. It didn't come to my attention until the end of last year, because there was nothing that indicated to us we needed to do it. By that time, the budget had already been submitted, so we had to wait and come before you this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know what the availability of the equipment will be if you get approval and move forward with it?
Almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
I say that, though, keeping in mind supply chain issues that are going on right now, but what we've been told is it will be almost instantaneous that they can get it to us.
Okay. Oh, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is ISAC involved in this aspect of their digital infrastructure?
We are involved in some of it, but we're not at this level of it. The police side, we have not had as much participation in terms of looking at these types of hardware scenarios.
I mean, I don't want to get into security-related issues or turf-related issues, but some of this, it isn't so much sophisticated as it's a real expertise in digital network systems and digital security and that sort of thing. And I don't know that the department necessarily has that kind of talent on staff. You may, I just don't know. And that's part, because ISAC is a voluntary thing, right?
Correct.
There's no,
It's an advisory committee.
right, but we also have the MIS department.
Right.
But they also are not involved in this, are they?
involved in terms of maintaining the network to the police department, but the police department does most of the network and
To it in terms of,
connectivity.
well, broadband to the,
Broadband
to
to
the,
the building, yeah.
head of the server, but that's the end of it.
That's pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, that all kind of bothers me a little bit. It seems like it's time that we look at a closer relationship of MIS to the infrastructure that police and fire are using for all these digital support systems and databases. It's not a criticism, it's really an observation that this stuff isn't hard to deal with and keep operational and make work if you've got the skill sets to do it and the support. But it's not the sort of thing that, you know, you typically would walk around with in your department, I don't think, or in most departments in the town. So I think this is an area where we should look closer at giving it better support.
Absolutely.
It really does bother me.
And the fact that like,
Maybe I'm wrong here. Roger has a point, I think.
Brad
I
was
was just going to follow up on your comment about including it in IT refresh. Was that just based on our previous comments, or have you talked to IT about it?
No, I've actually spoken to Joe Bongiorno about these when I first had taken over with, from Chief Kent. So last July, he and I had a meeting here at Town Hall with Jose, and this issue came up. And when I spoke to him, I said, well, the way I'm gonna have to do it now is going before Ways and Means and then get it into the system with the town IT. So he and I were on board with that.
To me, that'd be great if this doesn't show up in the police budget again, it shows up in the IT budget.
Right, but
yeah,
The whole infrastructure up to.
we did a whole network upgrade a couple of years ago. We started that process over again. So we should make sure that, go back and do an inventory to see if we missed anything else somewhere else. Mike?
So just to follow up, one of the discussion points we had with the chief was kind of, you know, ongoing support for his IT stuff. They had someone on, you know, on the police force that was, their job was basically the IT person for the force, and they weren't on the street doing regular police stuff. That person retired. They you know, filled that position, but turned that position into a policeman on the street position. But they have outsourced some of the roles there to a private company. So they have someone come in now to help them with their IT, because it is pretty specialized systems, and it may not be something that the town IT is going to be able to maintain, certainly from a specific police system, software, administration, operation perspective, but they do have that arrangement with another outside company.
Brad?
So maybe I'm just misremembering, but is separating the police network for privacy and security reasons, has that just been a convention? Or I think at one time I was under the understanding that there was state law that dictated the separation. Could you refresh my memory?
So I know the reason the system is separate now, there's some situations with the system. For instance, anybody who comes in and touches the system, because there's law enforcement sensitive, what they call CORI information, criminal record information, anybody who touches that system must undergo a CORI check. So all of our people are CORI checked. So that was an easy transition for us. So there are certain things that do have to be locked down on that network so that CORI information can't get out. The biggest thing for us as Chief Kent was transitioning towards retirement, and we saw the officer who was getting ready to retire, we wanted the officers back on the street. But we needed to bridge that gap. So that's why we brought in that private company, because this private company that we're using on a part-time basis works specifically for other police departments and law enforcement. So we knew he and his staff were CORI certified, et cetera. And the other thing, the biggest part of this is when the system goes down, we need somebody immediately. And as luck would always have it, the system goes down at 2 a.m. It's not 2 in the afternoon. All I know from the chief's standpoint and the deputies is when I go to turn on the computer, I want it to run, right? But there's other things that go on in the background that we need to make sure they're up and running all the time. So that's been our problem. So to Frank's point, I don't disagree at all. And I would love to get there, but right now I'm kind of holding the cards that I got to kind of bridge that gap from a full-time police officer to whether town MIS or a private vendor taking it over.
Or some.
I hope I answered your
Or
question.
some combination of both, like increase the level of cooperation with
Yeah.
MIS, but
That's
still,
something we should do here.
yeah, still rely on the application-sensitive stuff with the experts. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second?
Okay, David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Sonia,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob, yes, John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, so that's 14-0. Moving on to Article 708, which is the body cameras.
Right, so this article is for providing storage for the videos taken from the body cameras. The police department went forward with a grant, applied for a grant requesting, reading off the memo page here, $240,000 for the systems. Turns out they did get the grant, but the office that was providing the grant notified the police that they wouldn't actually pay for the storage of the videos. That's not part of the grant. So because of that, the department is now requesting $222,870 specifically for storage. I think this was a 5-year, for storage for 5 years. And also licenses, I guess, estimated at $39.10 per month for each of the 95 body-worn cameras. So that adds up to the 222. So if you take the amount that they won in the grant for the cameras themselves and add in this amount that they're requesting for the storage, that will get them to their original request of the $240,000. This is also something that is part of police reform in conversations with the chief, and it may be something that is mandated by the state at some point in the future, so it's good to get ahead of this request and work with this grant money while we have it available. But we do need to be able to store the video when it comes in. There's also a little bit of a time frame associated with this. So the grant was awarded on 12/30/2021. The requirements for this program have to be in place within 6 months in order to take advantage of that grant. So that's got to be by end of June. But it looks like an important program. I know the police are happy about it. They think it's going to be something that will kind of protect them so that they can show, that they are following procedures and so forth. So it's viewed by police as a good thing. They want to have this capability. And the subcommittee supported it 2-0.
Thanks. Questions from the committee? Roger?
So if I get this right, this is gonna cover the first 5 years of storage. Thereafter, this probably has to end up in the operating budget.
Yes,
It's gonna be an ongoing thing.
yes.
That'll create a bump in the budget when the time comes, because it's a non-trivial amount of money. So,
But it's not it's the 222 divided by 5, right? So it's not a bump each year.
Not a huge number, but, it's half a person, a quarter of a person, something like that.
If you don't mind to, just to explain, we came in, because, one of the requirements is we need to work out with the union, a policy, and the town administration would also have to get a collective bargaining agreement or a memorandum of understanding because of the change in working conditions. Because we don't know what that policy is gonna look like, we tried to get cameras for everybody over there, all 95 police officers. It's very possible that, based on how the policy would work out, we may not need that many. So I aimed high, hoping we don't need that much, and then depending on how it pans out start to move things into the operating budget if in fact it becomes a mandatory item, which is yet to be seen. So I hope that helps.
But that's fine as a warrant article. If there's any money left over, it'll come back to free cash. But when it settles into the operating budget, it'll be a more stable situation.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, two questions. First of all, maybe more towards the administration, and it's a little bit general, but all of these things that we've been doing so far are all free cash, am I correct? So, that's a thumbs up. So, there wasn't consideration to using more of the opera money for these things, because these are kind of all one-time events? Was it just not, we just don't have enough of it available? I'm not, you know, I probably should know the answer, but I really don't, and I just want to double check.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the main things that we're able to use ARPA funding on is water infrastructure. As you know, we were hit with a very large
Right.
PFAS problem, $15 million, so we're hopeful. Where the select board, once we get through town meeting, is gonna consider the current uses of ARPA funding. We've been very stingy with it to date because of the PFAS issue. So that's our goal with as much ARPA money as we can, is to put it towards the PFAS problem, keep it off the debt schedule.
Right.
So these, we consider these more associated with the normal operating needs of the town as opposed to being related to the pandemic, so to speak. So we're trying to be mindful of that as well.
So, once you get a balance of what's left after you get the water treatment stuff taken care of, is it possible that there would be some opera money that we could use for this, or it doesn't fit?
We only received approximately $8.5 million worth of ARPA, and the PFAS project, as you recall, is $15 million. So
All right, so there really isn't probably going to be any left. All right, that answers that one. The second question is, how long do we need, this is really for the department, but how long do we need to store? I assume that once we get the body cameras on, however many officers are wearing them, that the camera would be on the whole time they're on duty? Is that how it works?
So that's a good question. It comes up all the time, and it's yet to be determined, because there are going to be privacy concerns, not only for the officers, they do still have
Right, the
privacy
people they're
concerns,
talking
but so do people as well. So those are all things that are going to have to come out with the policy, and quite frankly, those are things, because it's still novel, that are going to have to go through the courts over the next couple of years to make determinations.
All right, I only asked that to get some sense of how much data we're talking about. So let's assume that the worst case would be all patrol cars, one-man cars, 24 hours a day, cameras on. That's your worst case. How long do we have to store the data?
It would, I don't know what the Freedom of Information, or the Secretary of State schedule says specifically, but I know if we're storing it, let's say for a crime or certain types of crime, it's gonna be longer than if it was just general patrol activity that somebody would wanna see, but I don't have the schedule.
So do we have a way to hunt and peck through this stuff at the end of a year to say which can be thrown out and which can't?
So basically what would happen in speaking to departments that have it is if there is an incident that body-worn camera footage is there, they immediately download it into their system and they make a flag into their records management system that that's evidence. But general footage on the camera that isn't called for through Freedom of Information, or it isn't an incident or an arrest, that would get wiped after, I've heard as little as 72 hours to 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's tagged as either evidentiary or needed or not.
The
Some
evidence would be
percentage is
taken right
kept.
off, yes.
All right, so then, the vendor you're getting this storage equipment from, do you know if it's doing extensive amounts of data compression or making the data smaller on the data?
I don't know.
This sounds like, to me, it sounds like too much money for the amount of data you would actually have to keep. Has anyone has the vendor figured out for you what you need, sized it?
Well, the vendor we went for this specifically was one that we knew was gonna come in high, but it doesn't mean that we would have to use them.
But if they sized your needs, how much storage you need per year?
No, I don't know how much of a deep dive they went into it. They're the experts. We told them how many cameras, that's the price they gave us, but I don't know how they came to the figure.
All right, and so the price, aside from the grant, the free cash amount is how much again?
222.
222.
And
It's an
just,
estimate. I mean, it
Yeah.
may not be needed. I'm
And-
assuming the price is gonna depend on the volume, right?
And what's it stored on? Do we know that? How is it stored, on optical discs or what? Do we know?
I don't know.
So, I'm not opposed to this. I'm all in favor. We have to store the data that needs to be stored. You gotta store it somewhere. I just want to make sure that the vendor is giving us the right size and that we're getting technologies that are efficient for that kind of long-term storage. It doesn't need fast recovery, it just needs reliability. And I would assume that the data can be, squashed a lot. It's all medium resolution data, that sort of thing.
Not if it's
So,
Pardon?
evidence you want high res.
Well, it's only what the camera gets.
Right, but if you try to overcompress it, you lose detail.
Well, okay, I agree with you, but I wonder if we've really had the vendor figure all this out. It's a pretty big number.
so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to Frank's point, the way we priced this out, we went through a very well-known vendor of these cameras all over the country, very well-known name. I don't necessarily want to throw it out there in a public meeting, but it's a very well-known name.
Okay.
With the hope that they were going to be able to anticipate what we would need based on your questions. I can't answer it technically, but this is like the best vendor in the country. If you were to see anything that's related to body-worn camera, it's probably this vendor. And that's why we pulled these numbers, but that doesn't mean we necessarily would have to go with this.
Okay, thank you.
Chris,
So I'm gonna agree with you, Chief, that more than likely they've associated themselves with our laws because, and this is just going from the law itself, but it says standards for identification, retention, storage, maintenance, and handling of recordings from body cameras, including a requirement that recordings be retained for at least 180 days, but no more than 30 months, for recording not relating to a court proceeding or ongoing criminal investigation, or for the same period of time that evidence is retained for a normal course of the court's business or recording related to court proceeding. So I'm guessing that's why the cost is so high, is because there is gonna be a lot of storage that will have to happen within the course of this.
question
Put it to the vendor. Yeah.
We'll give
I'm
them
not
all,
gonna debate it here.
give them all Ring cameras.
Yeah.
assessment.
It's like when the contracts come in, we should get a good technical review. of
Yeah,
the-
that would be, that's a constructive recommendation. When you're going out to bid and you're getting bids back, you should get some independent technical assistance.
The ISAC committee would be
Right.
more than
Just-
happy to look
Just
at
to
that.
squeeze out, what are they really selling us here? And do we, it's not even that they just might be overselling to thinking that they're giving you good coverage, and maybe we don't need that. I just don't know. Okay?
Understood.
Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just a couple of questions. Where's the data actually stored? Is that going to be on-site at the police department, or is that in the cloud somewhere?
I believe this company here is cloud-based.
Okay, so all of it has to go up to the network, and they maintain the entire system for you?
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Doug.
Oh, sorry, Doug.
I'm sorry, I'm reflecting back, Chief Kent, when we asked about cameras, I think when we first started talking about tasers, because both of them were coming in. And at that time, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, he was really concerned about some of the privacy things and concerned that a neighbor could do a Freedom of Information Act on a call that was 2 days ago and get more than they should in a personal conversation between the officer and the neighbor, or see inside the house if the officer walked through there. Has all that kind of fleshed out now through the courts, or is there more protection than there was at that time, or are we just more comfortable with it?
I would like to tell you it's all fleshed out. I don't believe it has. There is still a very vast area of the law that's still got to be narrowed down, but a lot of the basic privacy concerns that you bring up have been flushed out. For instance, if we walk into a house and the camera is on and we're in there on a medical, and we happen to see something that's incriminating, but we don't do anything about it at the time, and a week later the officer says, oh, I think I saw something in that house, they can't go back and review that camera. They need a search warrant. So those privacy concerns go both ways. But truth be told, there are still going to be some issues that, if I see them, we would just exclude it on a public records exemption and let the Secretary of State work it out, and hopefully it'll work its way through the courts. But it's going to take a while before we get all of this narrowed down.
Roger, you were saying something? Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
The chair votes aye, 14-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time. Good night. Thank you.
Okay. So the next up, I think the next couple of warrant articles are going to go quick. 2, the transfer of funds between various accounts is withdrawn, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
The world's getting complicated.
Transfer from free cash to stabilization,
We as a committee, based on our free cash discussion, had decided not to move forward with this.
okay, so that will be
Administration.
withdrawn.
So,
And then Article 5, transfer from free cash to OPEB?
same
Same thing.
Same thing.
Okay, great. So that was 3 quick articles. The next one
Steve.
is,
Since we have a few people who are here for specific things, a good reason to take some things out of order.
we could take some out of order. Thank you for the
I was
reminder.
thinking rec, but I didn't take some.
Well, let's start with the sculpture park. If we could.
29.
Yes, 29. Yes.
We want to go home too, but
Yeah, we're kind of stuck.
Hi,
Brad?
everybody, thank you.
So Megan and I spoke with Barbara LaRue. You're on the planning board, you're chair this year?
I am not the chair of the
Not the chair
planning
this
board,
year,
but I am the
a
chair of
past
the
chair.
sculpture park committee.
And she is representing the Burlington Sculpture Park Committee, which is a committee set up by the planning board.
It's a subcommittee, yes.
Which is, yes. So, so this is an article, it's requesting $20,000 to be spent on maintenance and improvements for the town of Burlington Sculpture Park. The money is intended for, it would be put to use for 3 separate uses, and hopefully this addresses any CPA questions. I get that, I remember right. There is a bit of urgency to this that couldn't wait for the 2 years. The most urgent need is that 5 of the sculptures over in the park were leased for 2 years ago. So they're all up this summer. So the plan is to enter into 5 new 2-year leases at $2,500 per sculpture. The second use, I guess a case could be made, that I don't know how many bidders there are on the new piece of sculpture, but there is a new piece of sculpture that the committee is looking at purchasing for $9,000. And then the third use of the money would be for ADA compliant walkways at the park. And the current estimate right now is around $10,000. So for those of you summing as we go, that is more than $20,000. That running total is $31,500, and there's some talk of adding a contingency amount. But the request is for $20,000 since the committee currently has $16,861 in donations. So the combined amount should cover all of the costs. And again, rather than think about having other funding sources, the subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Hi. Please introduce yourself and if you would like to supplement Brad's report.
Sure, I'm Barbara LaRue, and I am a member of the planning board, and I am the planning board representative on the sculpture park committee and the current chair of the sculpture park committee. I think Brad summed it up very, very well. I just wanted to clarify one thing. The path is not going throughout the park. That cost would be to smooth out and make ADA compliant the entrance, and then have a pathway to the bench that's immediately to the left of the entrance with a small platform there. That money would not cover walkways throughout the whole park.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Chris?
For the lease, is these going to be new sculptures, or is it the continuation of the current sculptures?
These would be new sculptures. As you know, probably the big yellow cherries have been purchased. Havoc the dog has been purchased. We would like to purchase one more, that's the $9,000, but the other ones would go away and would be replaced by new sculptures to keep everything kind of fresh and interesting.
David?
I've talked about this for a few other, unfortunately, I'm opposed to this. Again, this was an endeavor that started, which is a fantastic endeavor. I've visited it, I've had my cousins there and my niece and nephew. I'd be a supporter, I'd be a contributor. I'm not sure it's the best use of taxpayer money. When it started with a donation and a vision.
Yes.
To start this park. And I believe at the time it was based upon, again, it was a private group and a private endeavor that was going to be raising funds privately. Bottom line. It wasn't, it didn't start through town meeting, in having the land being used for this purpose as something that would eventually cost the taxpayers funds. Park started, so I went back and just tried to refresh. So the pads were laid on July 14th, 2020. The Burlington Union did an article the next day. Part of the article talks about how it mentioned each piece has a 2-year loan period. After 2 years, the town will have the option of purchasing the sculptures, many of which depends on how much funds are available, and will be from donations. Flat out, at that point it was meant for donations. So I just have a tough time. Again, I'll be a contributor and I'd be a donor, but I just have a tough time for our taxpayers when we're making tough decisions on a lot of other items to say our tax dollars should be spent on artwork. I don't think that's the appropriate use of our funds.
May I respond, Mr. Chair? Yes. A few things. I respect your point of view. This was originally a private group that was starting it, but it actually came about as a result of the master plan work that the planning board and a whole lot of other boards working together came up with, and talked a lot about the desire of the community for more cultural amenities in town. And I think it's important to note that cultural amenities benefit everyone, and not just because they're pretty to look at, but local area businesses like the Sculpture Park. They like the fact that there are cultural amenities in Burlington. It attracts other businesses, just like when the Broad Institute is coming to Burlington, that's going to attract other businesses. Those companies like the fact that Burlington has a lot of other cultural amenities, and this is one of them. I agree with you. It was our intent always in the beginning for it to be mostly from donations. And the fact of the matter is, we have enough money to just continue at the level that we're at. We could just get another 4 or 5 sculptures on leases for 2 years. But we wouldn't be able to grow. We wouldn't be able to repair that entrance to the park and make it ADA compliant so everyone can enjoy it. And we wouldn't be able to expand outside, which that small footprint, which is the intent. It's something that we've been discussing quite a bit with the select board and within our own community, with our own committee and with the larger community. The Burlington community has really embraced this project, both the residents and the businesses. And I think we have proven over the last 2 years that it is a great benefit to the community. And I understand that it's taxpayer money we're talking about now, and that's very different. But we also spend a lot more than this on the parade every year that's over in an hour or 2 hours. This is money that will last a lot longer than a day, and it's something that people can enjoy all year round, all day long. So I understand your point of view, but I do think it brings a lot of benefits to town beyond just its pretty artwork.
Did you have something? No? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, hi, Barbara. Had a few questions. So I guess the first one is the spending authority for this, the planning board, is that correct?
No, well,
Since
that's an
you're a
interesting
subcommittee
question.
of the planning board?
We are a subcommittee of the planning board. We have all of our donations go into an account that is earmarked for Sculpture Park, and, well, John left. John Denizio approves all of our bills that go out, so it's not really the planning board that
Who is the
spends the
spending
money.
authority, I guess is the question.
I guess it's the Sculpture Park Committee, but then everything has to get approved by the town.
Can we ask Paul?
John
Yeah,
Denizio.
Paul, do you have an answer?
That'd be a no.
Not to throw you under the
Doesn't have
bus.
to be, I wasn't paying attention.
We're talking about
Who is the spending authority for the sculpture park money?
Whoever town meeting designates it, most of the article says to be spent at the direction of the,
Okay, so up
But
till
the
now,
warrant says spent under the appropriate authority, but it doesn't say who that is.
that's a very good
Who
question.
is that authority?
I'll be. Who would you like it to be?
I asked you first.
Well, who would the Sculpture Park Committee like it to be?
Right, that's the,
Got a committee that does the decision.
I think it probably should be at the decision of the Sculpture Park Committee that we should vote on each major expenditure that comes up. That's
So-
the way we've done it thus far, but we weren't dealing with taxpayer money up until now, so nobody really asked the question before.
The fact that it's a subcommittee of the planning board suggests that it's sort of the planning board, which I'll admit seems a little odd to me. If I had to guess, I would have picked the rec department if I had to pick someone. But you guys made the subcommittee
Right.
first, maybe.
Well,
So-
actually, what
John came back.
actually happened is that the committee was formed, and we were looking for a home, and rec didn't want us, so planning said they'd take us.
Okay, all right, well, I can understand how things happen. Although I'll say it's a little weird still. I guess my first inclination is to suggest a few alternate sources. So I don't know if this is an amazing coincidence or not, but I noticed the Sculpture Park gift account is $31,586, which is $86 more than you need here. So why, wouldn't that be the obvious choice to use that?
I'm sorry, could you say that, what was that?
Are there unpaid bills?
I'm looking at the town gift account that Mr. Denizio sent around earlier, and the balance on that is $31,586.
That's not the amount of money that we have. We have $16,861.
Is it marked Sculpture Park, John, or just gift account?
I think it's
It
just,
says town gift accounts and sculpture park line item.
Right, right.
It-
That's not all our money. I wish
Mr.
it was.
Denizio.
So that's how much was in on March 31st, because we hadn't spent the $14,000
Oh,
yet.
oh,
So we hadn't
okay.
paid for the sculpture, the cherries.
So that included the $14,000 that was raised? Oh, okay.
So it's
Thank you.
14,000 less than,
In April, yep.
okay, so there's about 16,000. So wouldn't it make sense to at least spend 16,000 from there?
Well, you can see how we're planning to spend it. The 16,000 would be enough to.
That's in there, okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. And then, I see, all right.
Yeah.
Then, I guess okay, so we'll cross that off. But there's a couple other possibilities. On the walkway, wouldn't that be an obvious choice for Disability Access Commission money?
And actually, that was something that Brad mentioned this morning when we met, and I'll be honest, I had not thought of that. I don't know if that's something that they could support. I would be very happy to reach out to them and find out. And like any other money that you allocate through warrant articles, if I get the money from Disability Access and I don't need it from you, it goes back to you.
Right,
Exactly.
I mean, we
No.
tax, we have to collect the taxes on it, so.
Right,
But then it would go back into free cash and be used, or actually, it's because it's a warrant article.
You collect taxes?
it eventually goes up in free cash, eventually, but,
The way this is worded, if I may.
Roger.
This appears to be a transfer of $20,000 into this account, not necessarily for a specific purpose.
You're right, so it wouldn't go
They
back.
list 3 purposes, but it does not automatically come back.
it automatically wouldn't come back, you're right.
So I think that's a hazard.
And
Sorry, well, I got the floor, if I get one more. 10 grand sounds like an awful lot for 40 or 50 feet of walkway
It's not just a walkway. They have to redo the entrance. It's currently very uneven and rocky, so they have to redo it. They have to grade it so that it's ADA compliant, so you can get in a wheelchair or something like that, and then go over. I personally, I'll be honest with you, when I heard the number, I thought it was a little high too, but that was the quote that I got. If we get the money, of course, I'm gonna try and get more quotes and drive the price down.
Sorry, one more thing while I got the floor.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think this is a great use for CPA money, and I would wait.
Right, CPA money will not
Thank you
be.
for saying that, so I didn't have to.
According
I didn't
to-
suggest that for the police.
According to the conversation that you had previously with the Historical Commission regarding the barn, that money would not be available for another 3 years, I think, two
At
or
least
3
two,
years.
at least two.
Which, what that would mean for the park is that we could turn over some sculptures. We would not be able to do the walkway. We would not be able to buy a sculpture, and we would not be able to do any expansion.
Right, but you could continue your current funding mechanism, which is volunteer donations.
We have this money, and we have worked really hard to get donations from the community, and we've been successful at it. But you all know, as well as I do, that raising money post-pandemic is very difficult, and we can't keep going back to the same well over and over again. You can see on here the list of companies that have donated to us, and we're really proud of that, and we're very grateful. But we can't keep going back to these same companies over and over again.
So something that the chair suggested also is this is an ideal Eagle Scout project. Something that Scouts BSA is always looking for are.
I mean, the walkway?
The walkway.
The walkway.
The walkway, yeah.
For instance, they've made, 40-foot walkways through swampland and stuff that this would seem pretty easy in comparison. So I was just reaching out to the local troops that they're probably itching to do something like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
And they take care of the fundraising oftentimes. So I would throw that out there, but again, I would say if the Disability Access Commission isn't willing to fund this, it doesn't make sense to do it in my mind if they don't think it's worth doing. So.
First of all, I don't think if the Disability Access Commission declined to help us with the project, I would not surmise from that they thought it wasn't worth doing. I would assume from that there were other projects that they had to fund that came first, or that they didn't have the money for it. I don't think I would assume that they thought it was not a worthy project. So I would make that argument.
It's a fair point. I'm just trying to see what their balance happens to be at the
I thought it
moment.
was like 91 grand, but we can't speak for
No,
that
you
money.
Right.
No, we can't.
Can't speak
Right.
for that.
I think it would have to be part of the motion to use it. To use ADA money on the floor.
That's what I would
They have,
suggest.
But we,
it's a different commission, they have their own,
right, we can't.
Well, we could suggest reducing it by 10,000 would be the implication.
Frank?
I'll just reiterate that this park has been enthusiastically received by virtually everyone in town. The residents love it, the businesses love it. Even the select board has come around, and they were a little skeptical at first. I think that it brings something very important to town that is lacking in Burlington, honestly. We're known as the town that has lots of restaurants and a mall. And there's a lot more to Burlington than just restaurants and the mall. And I think that this park has been a wonderful amenity. It's brought people together, especially during the pandemic. We were able to have outdoor events there. It's been really embraced by everyone in the community, and I think that the taxpayers would probably be very happy to spend this money on it, especially considering, like I said, we're looking to spend a lot more than this on a parade that lasts a couple of hours.
Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barbara, and I know on a lot of people, I don't run into that many people who just volunteer. If I ask them a question, I get really the kind of probative response that I'm looking for. This is a popular thing. There is no question about it. And one of the donors, Reamer and Bronstein, is here tonight, and the donations have been fantastic. I am completely in favor of this. What I'd like to, and I think what we're kind of running into here is basically a volunteer grassroots effort that's put together something that's really valuable, well-received, it's different, it's good for lots of people. But we don't have it structured in such a way, John and Paul, that it's kind of a standing organization with a reporting structure and a budget that's just normal, because this almost has operating costs. If you look at renewing sculptures, even if we did half match, right, that you'd probably want to be spending somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a year to keep this thing vibrant. I think, there's some number out there that's got recurring costs. They'd be discretionary, but it's money. And so how we funded it really doesn't matter if it was a warrant article with cash as available, or if it went onto an operating budget of some department or something. But it doesn't really have the kind of home that I think Ways and Means looks at it like, here's the budget for this year, what's it for? Yes or no. It's more of a, where's this coming from and what is it? And the issue of taxpayer money being tabbed, free cash is not free. There's no such thing as free cash. Hasn't been invented yet. So we're kind of persnickety about that these days. So going forward, if we could get this into more of an operational structure, that it came to us in a way that we weren't trying to sort out, where's the money going to come from and whose money is it and what are we doing with it and what's the life of this thing, it would be better. That's all I'm thinking. For the moment, I don't have a problem doing this, but this will keep reoccurring and we shouldn't have to have this kind of a conversation every year. That's what I'm thinking.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
For the record, Robert Buckley, Raymond Bronstein. I represent, I guess, the business community on the committee.
Yes.
And I sat on the master plan committee. And the genesis of this came through those discussions to what is it about Burlington that makes Burlington unique and attractive and a place that you want to live. I've practiced here for 30-some-odd years. I've always said that Burlington has a phenomenal art department at your high school. And I've seen some of the work, and they have a lot of other cultural attributes. And when I meet with clients that are interested in coming to Burlington, I tout those. And when we talked about that at the master committee, there was a group that said, we should do it. And I said, the bedfellows I'm involved with on the sculpture committee, I think people would say, he's with all these people, but I believe strongly in it. To the point where we have put substantial funds into it. We don't get anything out of it, personally. But when I remember having a debate with Barbara, and Barbara came up with a great idea, I said, people want to go up there and they want to sit. And they want to look around. We need benches. And Barbara had the idea, let's make the benches pieces of the sculpture. And if you went by and you saw how they were doing it, and it was it was an entertaining and an educational experience. I understand the complexity of trying to fit it into a template that works from a municipal finance standpoint, and that's totally reasonable. But I would submit that this is akin to a good recreation department, a great art department, civic pride. I will also tell you, and this is going to surprise people, that I would say 70% of my practice is outside of Burlington. That when I'm in other cities or towns, everyone's trying to do the same thing because people want to attract people to live there and have diversity and activities that keep people focused. And as I said, I've been very outreaching to a number of businesses that have committed substantial funds to date. I can tell you that if this takes off and is sustained, and that's the question here, is sustainability. Because if you break the chain, you'll never be able to have that prime mover to start the chain again. But I will tell you that this afternoon I had a conversation with a major player in this town that, is contemplating as they go forward with their development to start purchasing these sculptures as they roll off of their lease and be part of the ambiance of their campus or their location. But I do think it is an intangible asset for a community that creates a lot of civic pride, and that's good. And it makes people want to come here and be here and enjoy all the other amenities. I'm an outsider talking about it. I live in Boston. I live on adjacent to the Greenway, and I will tell you there's nothing more enjoyable than on a summer evening to walk down the Greenway and look at the annual change in the art that goes there. There's a sense of comfort and pride, I guess. I mean, I don't know enough about municipal law in terms of financing it, but I do think that the business community is going to stand behind it. But what I'm afraid of is if you break the chain, you won't be able to rekindle the chain because there are people involved. I know of no one else in the business community that's put into it the way I have, and I don't think you'll find anyone who will step to the plate for that. But
Chris, and then Brad.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to say it's part of the identity of what we've talked about and what we want for Burlington. And I don't know about the rest of you. I have a 3-year-old. Every time we go to an event in Town Common, we have to go over the Culture Park. There's no way. It's line of sight. You can see it. We're on a car. We're still going to have to go in there. And what I love is the extension of the Town Common that we now have with that. My thinking here is if there are things that the community needs to access it, like an ADA compliant, that is something that is part of our responsibility for this park that has become very popular, and making sure that all residents, and then if we're looking to then buy something to stay on it on Burlington property, that's where I would say that is our responsibility. So if the only recommendation I was here would reduce it by $1,000 for $19,000 because we need the ADA compliance so everyone can access this, just like they should be able to access everything in town. And then if we're going to purchase a statue to keep there, those are things that are going to become part of our fabric as a town. And it's great that we have such great corporate sponsors, but if we're going to own it as a town, then we should financially say this is what we really want. And adding the pocket park, adding the sculpture park, adding these things, especially during a pandemic, has increased the amount of use that we've had in our town. And I think that's only for the betterment of the community we're trying to continue to build, of the families, the single people, everyone who's coming into town can be able to use and appreciate this. It's not just a kid experience thing, it's not just an adult thing.
Brad.
So, I noticed the same thing about this, Frank, that there are ongoing costs.
Yeah, this is a financing question. There's no question about the merits of this.
So I wasn't looking at this warrant article so much as a referendum on the sculpture park.
Right.
I'm looking at this more as a referendum on bringing it into municipal government with a regular funding
Right.
schedule. So, there are arguments for, there are arguments against, and I'm for moving it and putting it before town meeting and see how it flies.
Well, that won't solve the longer term problem, but sure.
It says a yes to these guys of we need to figure out where to grab this up in the
How do we
organization.
maintain it going forward?
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion? Could you amend the article to provide that the money's to be spent in accordance with, whatever procedures to be established or controlled?
So I don't have any of that.
Yeah, I mean, we could adjust the
Yeah.
recommended amount, but I don't think we can just specify the correct authority.
In terms of moving forward, we're very happy to work on it with Paul and figure this out. It's not something that I had thought of before, but I'm certainly open to it.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can work with the committee and have that provided within the motion for the article at town meeting, so we can work it out between now and then.
Okay.
And in terms of whether you want it as a budget in the future, let us know. It's the first year, so I'm unclear. The committee submitted a warrant article, and if you guys would prefer a sculpture park budget within the operating budget going forward, we're happy to present it however you like.
So my point, Mr. Chairman, just to be really clear, assuming that there are although minimal, real ongoing costs, just like the Historical Commission, then it should have a budget. So we don't get into these goodies of, where's it coming from, and taxpayer earmarking and whatnot. Warrants out of free cash for something that's almost a volunteer thing with a ton of support is odd.
I guess what I'm saying is, the committee submitted a warrant article under the process that we have here as a government, and that's how it's presented to you. So we're happy to discuss any options in terms of how the committee would like it budgeted going forward. We don't, if somebody submits a warrant article, we don't say, no warrant article for you. We accept the warrant article and we present it through the process. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, so.
All right.
Roger and then Brad, sorry.
If Brad's done, I mean,
Well,
go ahead.
just following up, this is a new thing, and again, we kind of have to see
We have
how
to work
town
our way
meeting-
through
how-
it.
And we have to see how town meeting reacts to it, and,
I would certainly like to see it as an operating budget item going forward, but I also know we have CPA potential money in a couple of years that would be available for it, potentially available for it as well, so it might be better for a wait-and-see approach. Roger?
golly, there were two things. One is, as Barbara mentioned, the 4th of July committee has been doing this thing without administrative support, where we give them a bunch of money and they fundraise a bunch of money, and it's an ad hoc committee, volunteer, et cetera. So we have another one of these.
Which has not been easy to deal with.
Oh, no, it comes around. Anyway, without going as far as moving the motion, I think we should move on and put it before town meeting.
John?
Just a quick point, I would suggest, ultimately, the operating budget is probably the right answer, but I would suggest not putting it in the operating budget until we see what happens with CPA, because we can't use CPA for operating budget items. So that would be a reason not to put it in until we see what happens with CPA, and, do it the weird way for a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one final comment?
Please.
I would submit that my big fear is, and Barbara's right, I mean, I've gone and made dialing for dollars and raised a lot of money for the sculpture park. I personally, my firm, is going to continue to support this. I believe that it is a worthwhile endeavor for a community to have this type of diversity of culture. That being said, I would submit that if we don't break the continuity, that it continues. That's my fear, that it breaks, because once it breaks, no one's going to start it up again. I would venture to say that it's going to take off on its own. And whether there's an operating budget, it would probably be administrative, but there's a lot of interest in a lot of the type of corporate entities that are migrating from the inner core, the Cambridges out here that want to see that, their employees want to see that. You're going to see that activity, and there's going to be a self-fulfilling or self-sustaining type of an approach. That's my goal, and when I set a goal, I tend to work towards it. So,
And
as Frank knows.
I will add that the committee does indeed intend to try and get CPA funds if that passes, but, that remains to be seen.
That's what you got to lobby for, CPA. I want to make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. David?
No.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia? Oh, Sonia left. Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, so that's 12-1-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's tackle the rec. Right? I guess we would start with 24.
We start with the good stuff first.
Let's start,
accepting money.
let's start with the hard one, 24. The will of Marshall Simons.
Thank you.
Doug?
So Sonia and I met with Brendan this evening, just to go through these few items. And we just got the total from the Marshall Simons Trust today. It's, this year it's $70,382.69. You know, many times the money is earmarked for several projects and to assist with different things that the rec department is doing with summer programming and so forth. This year, it's going to go toward the Treehouse project that you've seen. And I think Brendan, we'll let Brendan, I don't want to steal his thunder, but.
So let's hear about the treehouse.
All right, thank you very much, Brendan Egan, Director of Parks and Recreation. So in the past, we've had a list of projects that have been vetted by the Simons Trust, the trustees. And a couple years ago, we talked about they talked about larger projects that they, would fund in the future. And we had come up with a treehouse for Simons Park to be built, not in the Pines, but in behind the Visco building. Before you get to the skate park area, there's a grove of trees that has a bunch of oaks in it. So we had come up with a conceptual plan, and about a year ago, the Gillingham family lost their mother, Natalie, who was a Recreation Department employee for a number of years, and Doug, most people up here know Doug. He was our park superintendent for 37 years. Well, the family was looking for a project to donate in memory of their parents and asked for a list of projects, and they selected the treehouse. So they made a very generous family donation of $100,000, which left $125 remaining. And we worked with the trust and were able to identify funds from last year, projects that could go on hold for a year or two, and then their disbursement for 2022, which is current, which is the $382.69. So we are able to fund the treehouse project. I passed around the sketch of what it will be. It's a 16 by 16 platform with a cover on it. It will be it's a fully inclusive or accessible treehouse. The ramping will come from the driveway behind the Visco building and go up through 3 platforms and then up to the top platform. It will allow us to have outdoor classroom space, expand our outdoor space for Club Simons, and throughout the year we'll have some soft, I don't want to say vinyl, but canvas curtains that will roll down so they can have, teach a class and not have the disturbing, noise from the outside going on as well, and then they'll roll up. But this was a project that had been on our wish list for a few years and really came to fruition with the generosity of the Gillingham family as well as Simons Trust. So that the funds this year will be going to fund this treehouse. The idea is that it will, right now we're on schedule for an August start. This company is a professional treehouse company, have worked across the country right now. They're in New Hampshire, then they're going to the Adirondacks, somewhere in the Adirondacks, and then weather dependent, all these projects are weather dependent. They'll be to us at the end of August with about a 10-week time frame to build. So we're very excited for this.
How long is the ramp? Like how this looks?
The distance, total distance of the ramp, if I can do quick math, 26, 42, 54, 70, 90, about 100 feet, 115 feet.
Okay. Brad?
Thank you. Is this the first or second reading?
This is the first.
Well, this is
First reading.
Yeah, the second comes in September.
Yep.
okay.
So from the second reading, the money from the second reading plus the money from this first reading of this year is going to be used for the treehouse.
So last year's disbursement, which was already approved, first and second, and then this year's, so we'll have the second reading in September.
Okay.
And those funds are available as of the second reading?
Correct. We usually receive the check in December at the end of the year. They are moving it up this year.
And just as far as the treehouse, I'm going to fall into this trap, bombard you with questions about this, but what are you doing about lighting or policing? Or do you lock it up at night down at the end, or?
We have talked about a gate at the end. We will probably install, we're gonna do some trimming on the backside anyways. There is a light pole that goes over the path down to the skate park. So we're not planning on locking it up. Both the family and the trust understand that there could be vandalism, just like any other park amenity. There could be that option. We do have cameras on the front of the building. We'll probably add one to the back pointing at that, as well as just increase the lighting that is back there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Chris?
What's the lifespan of this project?
You know, they didn't give us, you know, a warranty in number of years. It does require some, you know, continuous maintenance. It is all pressure-treated lumber. They will come back for the first couple of years to work with us on, as they've inserted cross bolts through the oaks and stuff, they'll come back to tighten because they do settle and things like that, so.
Water and ice, yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Any further questions? Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Just the dollar amount that we're approving is what? This is just the 70.
And we're receiving it.
This voting
Oh,
to
that's right, we
accept
take
it.
it from the will. Yes.
It makes it, does that make a difference for you?
Just double check it, you never know.
Yeah, be too careful.
So Frank?
Yes.
Okay. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair looks forward to seeing this treehouse. Thank you. 14-0, or sorry, 13-0. Okay, the next article up is 710, the pickup truck with a plow.
So 710 is for a F-350 pickup truck with a plow set up for $50,000. It's replacing a Ford Ranger truck that's 14 years old and the floorboard's rusted out and it has rust in the frame. So the fear is it won't pass inspection this next year. So obviously the Ranger does not function as a plow truck, and this would be able to add to the fleet of plowing. Rec department does recreation spaces. They help with the schools, but they also help with the streets to get everything caught up, especially now as we're having more trouble finding plow services. We voted 2-0 in favor.
Thank you. Would Rec like to add anything to that?
No, there's nothing additional to add. Doug did a great job.
Questions from the committee?
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry,
Oh,
quick
Chris.
question. I'm just trying to think back to, it was DPW that we had this conversation on, that they were looking to upgrade a Ranger to a F-150, and I thought their allocation was like $73,000. So I'm just trying to think if this was the right money for a plow truck.
This is the right money. They went to an F-150, but I don't think it was $73,000.
That's what I was trying to pull up.
I can't remember the number.
Because I remember asking why they were going from a Ranger and not an SUV, and they specifically wanted, a truck. But that was one that did not have a plow on it.
Not a
Right.
plow.
So that's why I was just wanted to see if this is enough money for having a plow.
I believe that it is.
Kevin Sullivan from the chairman of the Recreation Commission. It comes off the state bid list.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
that's the number.
Thank you.
And the number came through central maintenance.
That's fine. I just want to check.
Any further questions? Roger, you had a motion?
Move to approve?
Thank
Second.
you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Price of that pickup truck, if that's the one you're thinking of.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Yes.
Rob? John?
Yes.
13-0. And then 7-Eleven?
7-Eleven is, it's a larger purchase. This is for resurfacing or reconstruction, really is probably a better term, for the basketball court at Simon's Park. It's the only lighted basketball courts that we have. They have patched them over the years. They've been on the list to replace in the past. I believe they were on the warrant article list then when COVID hit and we started stripping things out. But they are now to the point, the cracks have been patched over and over, but they're to the point now that honestly, if we don't approve this, they'll probably have to close the courts. Because they can't patch them anymore, and there are some pretty big cracks there that are a safety issue.
Every time I go by, they're always in use.
They're very busy, they're in use all the time. This will include new LED lighting and new backboards and a little bit larger than the existing, not very much, but it makes them a little more like a regulation court. So this is $230,000.
Anything you would like to add to the report?
No, just stress the safety concern. There should be pictures in the packet. They're pretty beat up, the courts. It has been on our list. We've pushed it back for a couple of years. And then, as Doug mentioned, COVID. You know, the prices are only increasing, especially with the cost of petroleum, which is used, is one of the main components of asphalt. So we have, you know, already had some adjustments from when we originally talked about it. They're the original basketball systems there, the original poles, the original backboards and rims, and the lights are old metal halide. We do have a little spin timer on there, which does work, but the lights are positioned over the basketball hoops at each end and in the middle, which is a safety concern as well. It's not how to properly light them. The lighting system that we would be installing would be a Musco lighting system and LED lights, 25-year warranty, controlled, through an app or by the computer. So we'd be upgraded. It's a complete upgrade of that facility. And as a couple people have mentioned, it is the main courts in town, and someone's always on them. So.
And what's the lifetime of the courts?
For
this project?
Generally, it's a 10 to 15 years for the asphalt, but in New England,
It depends on your winters.
Yeah, your area, and so we're looking at 10 to 15 before, they'll just have to be resurfaced.
Okay. Chris and then Brad.
How long will the courts be out of commission for the project?
It depends on the bidding process, and but we would try to push it to be done quickly. If it's approved at town here and then at town meeting, we may even shut them down in August.
Brad?
So I haven't played on the court since COVID, but before then, played there pretty regularly with the group. There are certainly courts in town that the surface had failed worse than the failure we're seeing. I can't remember stumbling on any particular cracks over there, but yeah, the backboards are in bad shape, and I agree, those posts with the lights, I've probably slammed into those before, so that needs improving. One thing I have twisted my ankle on is there's a berm on the edge of the court. Does that get maintained, or?
So we will, as Doug mentioned, we will be increasing the size a little, so we'll be making them a little bit longer by, I think it's 6 feet on one end on the baseball field end.
Yep.
Closer to Cambridge Street. That'll allow us to separate the courts a little, move them a little further apart, and we are going to go into the parking lot by 5 feet. So we'll move the fence in. I think we may lose 2 parking spots. We've talked to planning about recreating those spots on the arc. If you come in from the intersection of Lexington and Bedford into those first 2 spots there on the end, when the fence comes out, it's gonna, we'll push them closer to the entrance, so we'll probably lose those 2 spots, but I think we can recreate them on the inner arc along Bedford Street, and it'll just allow us to move the courts a little away from that berm, because the berm will have to be replaced. It does hold back any earth from just washing onto the courts.
Okay, very good. I'll just watch where I step. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
You mentioned some backup. I didn't see any backup in either the mailing or on our thing, so, not now, but
Yep.
if you could send it around.
It was included, maybe it came in after everyone downloaded them, but I will send out, do you want the pictures? Is that what you were referring to?
I was gonna look at it.
Yep. I can share them with you right now, but I will send them out as well.
Oh, I don't need them now.
You sure you want to see these?
I'm happy to forward them.
Close-up of the crack.
I have not gotten them.
No, distance too. Close up, it looks like the Grand Canyon.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, Doug.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry, David.
Yes.
I was ready then.
I'll mark you. Frank?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Brad.
Yes.
Doug was, yes. Megan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob? John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, that's 13-0. Any other rec? I don't think so.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Again,
Thank
thank you very
you.
much.
And double thank the Gillinghams, that's an amazing donation.
Yes, yeah.
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 Oh,
Surprised and very thankful.
Yeah.
I look forward to that treehouse. That's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
Steve, can I suggest 7-09, the economic development one?
That's where I was going.
Maybe you could put their name seriously on the treehouse.
Melissa
somewhere.
asked us
There will be a
to
plaque.
have it later than 8:15. Melissa, I hope this is all right. So, 709, the economic developer. Economic development.
I'm having trouble with my video, of course.
We can hear you. Subcommittee report first, though.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we did meet with Melissa and talked about this as the transportation study on Route 3A totaling $35,000 coming from free cash. We learned a lot about how the process works and what's involved in making improvements on state-owned roads. Again, Cambridge Street is a state-owned road, and it's obviously in right in the middle of the overlay district. And the process involved in kind of going through what the overlay was looking to attract, and that was a more walk-friendly, bike-friendly area. It involves us getting involved with the state in planning. So we learned a lot of about, and Melissa's very good with it, so I might let her talk about it, but between the Mass DOT and being tip eligible and making sure that these studies are done and supported by the community that is looking for the improvements, it obviously helps in leveraging state funding for the purposes of those redesigns. So, so this is a $35,000 study. It's going to take a look at from the center of town through to Kinney. So that stretch of roadway would involve obviously Cambridge Street and Wynn Street, which is a very high traffic and an area that is very difficult. But we're looking for the town support in order to then go to the next step of the redesign process. So subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Melissa, would you like to add to the report?
Thank you, Frank and David for that. For the record, my name is Melissa Tentopoulos, Economic Development Director, and the request for town meeting is to initiate a transportation kind of study for the overhaul of the town center 3A section. So that is from the Common to Kinney roughly, at least the initial analysis would be. And this is born from my initial work plan when I came to Burlington. Outline was really looking at the redevelopment and I would say viability and kind of vibrancy of town center, not
short term, but in the long term. And so, through stakeholder interviews and through the different town officials that I've talked to over the years, this has been a priority area currently to kind of support our small businesses, but also to think to the future how it can become more of a village. And with that effort, it requires us to take a hard look at 3A. So a little bit more background on that. We have MassDOT that comes to us looking to repave 3A, and through that process, they have noted different areas that could be improved. There's a high crash area over at the Wynn intersection, and in terms of pedestrian access across 3A, it's been obviously very challenging. We've all heard the stories how difficult it is and unfriendly it is to, just being present, let alone walking and trying to connect to other places. So this money will get us started with a plan. We will use this money, it's kind of the bare minimum we need to get started. We will leverage that with money from MAPC, which is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and we will look at both the land use as well as the transportation by leveraging MAPC. And I think, presenting this to town meeting, the request is really, does town meeting, do we as a community want to invest in this roadway, in this area, or should we not? And we'll kind of rejigger our work plans and kind of redirect efforts if we don't want to invest in this area as a community, going forward.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Chris?
Mine's kind of just a procedural one. Why is it Kinney Ave and not Panos Ave, the next street up?
That's currently just, it was an endpoint for the scope of work at this point. And we haven't developed a scope of work, that's just what we're thinking at this point. It could be adjusted.
Because there's just that whole shopping center there that could potentially be lopped in. That's just why I was bringing that up.
John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, two questions. I guess one is sort of a pet peeve of mine, which is, will part of this process be to determine whether Route 3A is marked as 1 lane or 2 lanes in each direction there finally? I think that's got to be part of the reason for all the accidents, is that we don't seem to have the guts to force an answer on that. So I would suggest that would be an important result of this, is to definitively mark it one way or the other. The other thing is, so this is obviously tied in, or presumably obviously tied in with the whole multifamily housing zoning issue. Is that going to specifically be part of your charter with this study to come up with input on that?
We're working, I'm working with Kristen and the planning department in terms of the initial kind of MBTA communities requirements by the state. There's still a lot to be determined with that, so it's definitely part of our thinking, but it's not included yet, although this is separate from the other zoning initiative that is up at the Rogers Piano site, so that would be different. It would go under consideration if that development was forward, but this is apart from that. And with going back to the other question on, organizing our street and roadway better with, striping and so forth, I know that's been an issue in the past, but I think what we're trying to do is to look at the whole vision for the town center. We had done that with the overlay about almost 20 years ago now, but I think it's revisiting land uses and how our street grid works through the town center. So that's why I'd like to keep this, I keep talking about it as a roadway investment and study, but it's definitely, we want to leave it in with the land use. So that's where the MAPC money will be coming in. They came to visit us just a couple days ago, so and they're excited about participating in this with us. And I think I could go on a couple other things, but I think we're in a good position show that we want to partner with the state on a more significant project.
I think it's certainly good to look at this. I don't think we can look at this independent of the, as you say, the whole land use with the multifamily thing. They're very tied together, but there it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add a couple of things about, this is really a long-term perspective. I think we hear a lot about everybody desires a better center, and I think the roadway is the biggest barrier that we face down there. And this is really part of a sort of also a long-term plan where we're going to try to access federal roadway dollars that come through the state. And we've taken some steps to sort of giving ourselves a seat at the table there. There was a regional seat open that we ran in the election, so we now have a seat on the Boston MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and that's sort of the group that sort of divvies up federal roadway dollars that come into the state. So we really, Melissa is representing us there, and she probably regrets it at some point. They're very long and kind of boring meetings, but we now have a seat at the table there. So sort of the first step in getting the state's attention is to really let them know that we're serious about it by putting a little bit of our own money in it to get the project started, to get to a certain phase. Melissa, I think you said, at some point 25% design phase. That's somewhere in the future. I just want to be clear, this is something that we're trying to do. It's probably a long-term project. The tip itself, once you get on there, is quite a long-term project. So this isn't something that's going to be happening tomorrow. But our feedback that we get from the community is that we really want to focus some attention on the center. And this is sort of step one. And I think town meeting's vote will tell us whether we should continue to look in this direction in terms of trying to get that roadway improved, or if we should focus our attention elsewhere. Did I cover that okay, Melissa?
Brad?
Perfectly, yes. Thank you, Paul.
Did you have something?
We've talked about a few things, and there are other things coming up with zoning that talk about the community's desires and the overlay and master plans. Do we have a current master plan?
Yes.
What's, like, from when, and where can we find it? Is it completed? We paid for it. The work's done, but I don't know that.
As I recall, when we were talking to Kristen, she has been working to try to get it, completed, so maybe it isn't done.
Is that what we work from with this, though, is some draft version of a master plan? What do we use to say that the community is still interested? I totally supportive of that, but we keep saying the community, we get feedback. What's that based on? Do we have a master plan? Do we have something that outlines that?
Paul or Melissa?
I'm happy to answer that. So the current master plan is still in draft form, but the master plan has recommendations for town center, for the development of more village-oriented kind of a format. So that's kind of our guidelines there. It doesn't have explicit strategies beyond general recommendations. So I think part of it is obviously working with planning one element would be to revisit the overlay that was created. And then the other piece is I think what I'm getting at is kind of more specific, maybe roadway or streetscape design guidelines. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm sure. I want to know what's driving all of this, so that as we start spending money on things, that we're basing it on a study that we paid for maybe when I first joined town meeting years ago, and that was going to be a 3-year study, and there were lots of meetings, and we're working off a draft that I haven't seen. So it's not you. I'm not blaming it. I'm just saying, where's the information?
The draft is available.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the website.
It's on the website.
Okay. It's just called the draft.
Master Plan 1/3/2018.
Yeah. I mean, I was on master plan committee for a while. I don't know that I committed much, but I think a big piece of it was all the parties who contributed to the plan and it gave their input. So I think in some sense,
So we have a master.
Already using the concepts that are in the plan, even though they haven't put the period at the end of the sentence.
All right, beautiful.
But
So we have a master
not
plan.
exactly what
Doesn't
you're
really
looking
need a
for yet.
period. No, I don't know what they look like different. I don't know. Has a pretty picture on the
It has
front.
a lot
I
of
don't know.
elements, it has a lot of, potential alternatives, things like that. There's a lot of shape, but not a lot of, structure. It's,
Cool, thank you.
Brad?
So, I like seeing this one picture that this has been, I'm looking at 2, 7, 11, 12, 13, all these numbers where accidents have occurred. Yes, you're coming south on Cambridge past Wen, there is not, on the southbound lane, there is not 2 car widths. And so maybe if we get rid of the left-hand turn lane or do a land taking or something, that will resolve that. So, boy, whatever that takes to get done, I'm excited about that getting fixed. So Melissa, I see in your study here, you're saying a number of the things you're going to look at are cyclist issues. My wife and I were actually cold call by, of all things, the Lexington Bicycle Committee, and they were reaching, they went to our webpage and we're calling people over here to see if we have such a committee, and I know we used to, and Melissa, is there any interest in, would there be any value to reestablishing that committee, or can we deal with cycling issues in town kind of in a piecemeal fashion, as kind of reflected here in this potential study?
I want to keep answering this in so many ways for this committee, and have like a more discussion, but I also want to respect everyone's time. So in short, the roadway study would be a complete street, like the design would include complete streets. So it's accessibility and multimodal, so it's looking at different forms, including bike. So it would definitely be part of it. There has not been thought of an additional committee. I know there's been talk about reviving 3A committee. That said, as we look to kind of, the viability of any, space and place, looking at how you access it, overall is important. So all those networks, pedestrian, bike, road, are critical. And what we want to do is start thinking how we link in the neighborhoods. And so that's going to be part of the consideration. I don't know how far we'll get exactly at this point with this initial funding, but the thinking is there, and we want to be comprehensive and holistic about it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks.
move to approve.
Roger, thank you, Roger.
Maybe so bold.
Thank you, Megan. David?
Yes?
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
So Steve, who's the guy in the audience? Is that the assessor?
I believe so, yes.
Here for the CPI thing?
I believe so. And now it's the one I was going to do next.
Right? Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. It's keeping me honest. So let's do number 30, which is the CPI adjustment for the elderly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your patience, by the way.
Paul Tierney, maybe we should introduce you. Is this your first time to the?
Yes, it is.
You came for the
Second.
budget. Second.
Yeah,
Second.
this is the
Came for
second.
budget.
He's regular.
He's a regular now. So Article 30 is the CPI adjustment for the elderly. Commissioner of Revenue has determined the cost of living adjustments for fiscal year 2023 for communities such as ours that allow for real estate tax exemptions. This year it's actually 7%. To qualify, you must meet certain income and asset qualifications. And if you do, you have the ability to approach the town for an exemption of up to $1,000. In Burlington, there are a total of 21 households that have qualified and have applied but qualified for the exemption. So, bottom line, it's an excellent program. It supports lower income and lower asset families that don't want to leave their homes.
to support.
Would you like to add anything to the report?
No, thanks. I mean, Dave covered it all. It's just, I think it's a good program to increase the asset limit, and hopefully more people will qualify.
Questions from the committee? John?
Thank you. Just a quick one. What are exemptions does it apply to? Is this just real estate taxes?
Correct, yes.
It doesn't apply to anything else?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Even though I'm on the subcommittee, I want to make sure I have it straight. I'm assuming that if this is approved, we're accepting a change to the program that ties an increase based on cost of living numbers that are set by the state. We don't have to revote it every year.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, so what this is doing is it's adjusting the rules a little bit, where it allows the amount of the exemption to track inflation. Well, they call it the cost of living set by the Department of Labor and Statistics for the state. So we wouldn't have to handle this every year, and the adjustment for '23 will be 7%, if I've got it right.
Yeah, right now it is, yes, so it changes every year.
Yeah, okay, so just to be clear, it's a one and done, and it's a permanent change that makes the exemption more valuable to people that are in fixed income situations, which is the whole intent of it.
Will we get updated each year as to what that number would be?
Yes, we would update the chart on the website that would show the increase to the income and the asset limit.
Okay. Any further questions?
Just a quick one.
Roger.
So, I'm all in favor of this kind of activity. How does that show up when we set the tax rate? Is it just that, obviously, this number of people we don't get the full tax rate, so in some sense, there's a slight shift to the rest of the taxpayers?
It's actually, it's funded through the allowance for abatements, the overlay account, similar to a typical abatement.
Okay, so this is money that we've already set aside.
Yes.
As
So
potential abatements.
it wouldn't necessarily distribute the impact to other taxpayers.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. Any,
Real quick.
go ahead.
How do we currently advertise this program that's going on in the town?
I'm sorry?
How do we advertise this program as going on in the town so that people who may not know about it could find out more about it?
We could post it to our to the town's page, assessor's page.
Does it show up on tax bills anywhere?
No, this is already a current exemption. It would just raise, so the same people that are applying for it will still apply for it.
But I'm saying if there's other people out there that could apply for it and don't know about it, and if there's a way to increase that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do a lot of outreach through the Council on Aging, and on a regular basis, the assessor's office will actually go to the Council on Aging and sort of walk through the programs that are available. And I think you recently did something on BCAT, sort of talk about the programs that are out there that are available to residents that, in terms of tax exemptions and abatements.
Great.
Frank?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but I also think the treasurer's office is a tax collector treasurer, and I think when it makes sense that if someone isn't aware of it, that they're having an issue with their taxes, they help them figure out whether they're eligible or not. It's another place where it can occur.
No, absolutely.
Right.
And in fact, the treasurer tax collector runs a deferred tax program, which is another program that
So actually, yeah, so the tax collector is, to answer Chris's question, is really very proactive in trying to help people out.
Move to approve?
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia? Oh, Sonia left. Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Chair votes aye. It's 13-0. Thank you. Is there another one with the assessors or?
Article 31.
Yeah,
This, yep.
the 119 South Bedford.
No, Article 31.
Article
Okay.
31, the elderly.
Elderly and disabled, sorry.
Taxation
Yep.
fund.
Okay,
Again,
let's
there
do
was a
that one.
handout that was passed out to everyone, thank you again. Mass General laws allows for communities to establish a relief fund for the elderly and disabled for the purpose of defraying public charges that they're responsible for. So what this in effect is gonna do, almost like the scholarship fund, is they're gonna be adding a box to check for contributions to be made into this new elderly and disabled tax fund. A committee will be formed. It will be comprised of the assessor, the town treasurer, and then 3 town individuals appointed by the moderator. They will in effect take the requests based upon the amount of money that's put into the fund, and make contributions for them. Uncertain how much money will be in there, how well it will be received. It's something new, but it's allowed, and it seems to be a good thing to see what sort of support we can get. It's voluntary, obviously, these will be voluntary contributions, so subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Would you like to add anything?
No, thanks, Dave, covered everything, thank you.
Chris?
So the disabled part of this, does that have an age requirement to it? Or is it elderly and disabled, meaning all over 65, 70, or is disabled, could be any age?
Baseline was basically 60 years old, but if someone, we would consider people younger than that if there was a disability, yes.
John?
This may be sort of unknoble, but perhaps from other towns, obviously great that people, donate to this and take advantage of it. All I'm wondering is, it needs to be screened by the Council of Aging first, just going from backup, then there's committee of the assessor and treasurer. Have we done the cost benefit analysis to verify that it wouldn't be cheaper just to give them the money from the town than spend all those people's time? That is what.
I guess what I'll say is this, that the COA does screens residents regularly for these types of programs, so it wouldn't be a significant difference from what they do on a regular basis.
So incrementally, it's not a big deal. Okay. Do we have any sense of what other towns get from these kind of programs, or?
In my previous employment, one particular year, the town got $18,000 in donations. One was from a pretty large donor that didn't hold up every year, but it was in several thousand, so does provide some relief depending on how many applicants you get.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think, in part to John's point, the Mass General Law provides the umbrella that allows us to collect the voluntary money and redistribute it to qualified people with committee oversight. So there's got to be we couldn't just do this arbitrarily, right? You got to have some sort of a legal framework, otherwise I'm sure we'd hear from somebody. So that's, I think, the right way to do it. I also think we need to make it really clear that it is 150% voluntary, because we're going to start to hear, I think, a little bit, if not a lot, from some corners of, you're taxing us to death on every time we turn around, it's CPA this, and it's, sculpture that, and, this is voluntary. It's purely,
Plus, it
for the
also
good of the
competes
community.
with the scholarship fund, too.
Correct.
Right, so you have those
Correct.
two
And
volunteers.
it's simply added to your tax bill, whatever you volunteer to, there's a minimum contribution, right?
Yeah, not less than $1.
Yeah, okay. And it's added to your tax bill.
Okay. Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you. David?
Yes?
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, 13-0. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thanks.
All right. So, let's move on to number 6, which is fund the revolving accounts.
Could I, actually, Nick is still on the line. for
Oh,
the,
I'm sorry, what's
parade.
Nick waiting for?
For
The parade? Let's do the parade then, thank
subcommittee
you.
chair for the parade.
Sorry, Nick, to keep you waiting this long.
He didn't wait, but
I know, but he's been here at least an hour.
So Nick is taking over.
Hey, we've been here 2.5, or 2 and 3.
2:45, but who's counting? All right, go ahead, David.
Select Board, Nick has taken over the duties of the annual parade. Again, a big community event for the 4th of July that includes the parade, fireworks. 2020, we've been able to have it. Last year, there was more of a rolling rally with the
Fireworks. But this year, we're looking to bring the parade back to its original base that the town has seen for a lot of years. Typically, this is an event that is a shared event between the business and personal donations in the town. It's hard to go out there soliciting donations when there really hasn't been a formal, I don't want to say a formal parade, but the parade that they used to have, until we see it back in place and what could happen this year and people making donations, it's just harder to go through that. So this year's request is for what is generally the cost of the parade. This includes certain parade participants that are paid for, obviously a lot of detail that needs to get done, and the fireworks display. And they're looking to, for that $40,000 for free cash. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Thank you. Nick, would you like to add anything to the report?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the 2 years of the pandemic really hit everybody, you know, the business community, obviously, as we know, very hard. And last year when we did the rolling rally, it was essentially, you know, what the town provided, the 20,000 plus, you know, who could scrape together what to help us fund just the rolling rally itself, right? We did no fireworks. In our initial conversations with some of our prior donors, we're just not seeing the same return this year. Everyone's still very much, you know, trying to get back on their feet. And so the general consensus was that, you know, we asked the town to fund us in full to get us back on our feet this year, knowing full well that, you know, between now and next 4th of July, we're going to work our rear ends off to reestablish relationships and get funding back to where it was. So it's more of an even split.
Thanks, Nick. Any questions? Mike, and then Frank.
When you said you're gonna try to get back to where you were, you mean for this 4th of July or 4th of July 2023?
Right. So hopefully by 2023, when we come before this body again, will be for the $20,000 ask. The hope is to, you know, right now our biggest expense is the fireworks at $16,000. So, you know, we're trying to look at other vendors. We're trying to talk about multi-year contracts, any way to help reduce that cost a little bit, and make it more beneficial, more, you know, cost beneficial, I should say. But yeah, so this year for the 40,000, and then moving into 2023, bring it back to a more prior spend.
Okay, thank you.
Frank.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is kind of a structural question, Paul, maybe to you, and you may not even know, but historically, I think this was one way or another in the selectman's office, and I think at one time it may have actually been in their budget, and then we decided to move it out as a separate thing, as a warrant article. But is it kind of your understanding that the selectman's office owns the 4th of July parade?
Not at all. This is a citizen volunteer effort to organize the parade. The town's just supporting with the fund.
So the committee for that is created how? Nick's the chairman this year, right?
You want to talk about how the committee gets together?
Yeah, so it's a completely voluntary committee made up of residents. It just so happens that a selectman's been on it for a number of years. But yeah, it was done in conjunction with American Legion. And then moving forward, we'll actually be seeking our own 503 status to be a nonprofit. But yeah, it's its own standalone thing.
So is this registered as an entity, as a 503C?
Not yet.
Oh, that's what you're thinking of doing?
At some point, yeah, it's been in discussion.
I see. Okay, I'm trying to get my mind around these two things, the sculpture park and this, and how we deal with it, because it's enough money that it matters, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's good to have a strategy and a philosophy, a community understanding that we want a partnership to do, say, 50-50 kinds of things. You can't expect people to donate all of it if the town doesn't, the townspeople don't agree to fund some of it. So that's what we put the warrant article up for, I think, essentially, is to try to do half. The difference with this is the budget's kind of, well, I guess enough said. Why do we think it shouldn't be made not just strictly voluntary? Make it a part of a town-sponsored recreational thing?
Why should it be taxpayer funded? Is that the question, Frank?
Indirectly, yes.
Well, I'll just say that it's come to us in many different ways over the years. So again, a citizen committee submitted a warrant article through the process to the Ways and Means, and now you're hearing it, so.
And they decide
Yeah.
at town meeting,
Exactly.
right? Okay, thank you. I'll have to think about it.
Any other questions?
I'm all in favor of this, by the way, don't get the wrong
I
impression.
was wondering how much
No,
time
I
I needed to
think
stall
this-
for you to decide.
No, I think this is important to the community. Life has been difficult enough for families over the past several years. It's a really good thing. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, so that's 13-0.
I will observe that in terms of donations to townwide events, the rec department does a couple of events that now have fireworks, both at Christmas and some other time, so.
Oh,
there's a little bit of
Pride,
dilution
Burlington
of,
Pride, yeah.
there's more townwide events that are drawing on the same pool of donors.
That's a fair point.
And I never thought fireworks go with Christmas myself. It's a lot of fun, so.
Oh, you haven't,
You just don't understand Christmas, right?
yeah, you haven't celebrated New Year's Eve on Australia to understand how summer applies there, but that's a different story. Anyways, Article 6, the one I've been looking forward to for a while, revolving accounts.
So these are the expenditure limits that we have in the revolving accounts. Again, these were all in the handouts that everyone has seen. There are no changes from FY '22. Again, we did talk about a number of the revolving funds and what we may be looking at down the road, such as like local transportation, whether some of those adjustments need to be. Again, this is the expenditure limit of how much money can be spent a year out of those accounts. So that's going to go to 2-0.
Any questions? Frank?
One thing I think, it was cleared up in our subcommittee meeting, but at the end of the fiscal year, I believe, any funds that are above the spending limit roll over to the general fund, right?
So after the memo, there's a printout of the actual bylaw, And there are 3 that, anything beyond that limit. So there's 3 of them that have a limit that they can carry over into the next year. Cross connections, sealer, weights and measures, and the nurse.
It's not the same as the expenditure limit.
No.
No, the rollover, the ones that don't have that language in the bylaw, though, do roll over according to the expenditure limit, am I correct?
No, they roll over the entire balance.
The entire balance?
Look at the memo, it says which ones roll over.
So they go
which
back to
ones
zero?
No, they roll over in the revolving account. They don't sweep to.
It carries over.
Only 3 of them sweep the excess balance into the general fund. The rest of them stay in
And do they sweep it to zero or to the limit?
To the limit.
To the limit, okay.
If they're over the limit.
Okay, okay. And that bylaw is our bylaw? We could do anything with that?
Yeah, that's us.
As long as you get it 90 days ahead of time.
You submit it to the bylaw review, yes. And get that, go through that process.
So you can't get all the money.
But that is another applied process that we have for changing that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Move to approve. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye. I do that just to confuse you.
You caught me.
Sorry. All right, Article 15. Article 15 is the PEG Cable Access Enterprise Fund. This should sound familiar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is, so the way our cable access is handled actually across the country is cable companies, in order to do business in a town, negotiate with the town administration. As part of the negotiations, a certain part of their profits go toward cable access and and I believe there are at most 4 uses for such funds. So there's the cable providers and the town. So there's money coming in from the cable providers, goes to the town. They now are putting it into, so that money goes into the Cable Access Enterprise Fund estimated revenue account, right? And there's now, the towns then work with cable access providers, and BCAT has been chosen again. I believe there's a 20-year contract in place that was negotiated a couple years or so ago. The mechanism for paying out to the cable access is through this PEG Cable Access Enterprise Fund. The money, in order, is part of the legislation on an enterprise fund in Massachusetts. I'm hearing some feedback. Is that town meeting has to vote the flow through of the money. We actually have the BCAT treasurer here. That number sounds about right, Roger. And by the way, disclosure, Roger, Steve, Phil Gallagher, and I are all on the board over at BCAT, but this article, that's more for informational purposes. This is just purely the mechanism for the monies going out to BCAT. So the subcommittee voted 2-0 to support that figure of $585,000.
Any questions from the, Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great summary by Brad. I just wanted to add one thing. I think he was a little bit too kind to the cable companies by suggesting that they're sharing their profits with us. It's actually a surcharge on the cable subscribers. So you pay that through to cable, and then they provide it back to us to provide the PEG programming through BCAT.
A tax is a tax is a tax.
It's a fee, it's not a tax.
It's a user fee, yes.
That makes it much better.
Any questions? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to
for second.
Thank you. David?
Abstain.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, so that's 12-0-1. Down to the last two. 25.
And it's really only one.
Affordable Housing Coordination Services.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so, so the purpose of this article, the backup is actually pretty good on this, but the purpose of this article is, and I cribbed a bit, is to request funding in the amount of $40,000 for coordination and consultation services for affordable housing in Burlington. There is a committee, the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee, appointed by the town administrator, which has a mission to consider housing needs in Burlington with particular attention to housing opportunities that are affordable to residents of all income levels and abilities. Again, there's more to the mission in the backup, but the committee is requesting money to perform a study of affordable housing needs in town, and also use some money to work on setting up improved processes and programs to manage the affordable housing issue. Now, while the funding source is raise and appropriate, the increase in the cost will actually be backfilled. There has been a change. The select board changed the cost of a demolition permit from $200 up to $1,000, and the town sees about, believe it or not, about 50 of those a year now. So the money raised by the increase in that permit fee will cover the costs. So it's revenue.
So that's $800 per permit that's going to go to that?
Yes.
Excellent.
So revenue neutral. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, the town's done a very good job of creating affordable housing opportunities. We have quite a bit in town. It's never been anything that's been formalized in terms of a budget or responsibility. So over the years, it's been handled in a variety of different ways, through consultants, through committee members, through various departments doing different pieces of it. We have a rejuvenated housing partnership committee that's getting really active, and we're trying to modernize our programs and procedures. And up until this point, that we've never allocated any funding towards this initiative. And what they had requested is that we try to find a way to provide them with some resources, and what their intention to do is to utilize these funds at this point for some part-time, less than 20 hours consulting to come in and help them get organized with all the different legal agreements and developments, as well as Brad referenced the community housing needs assessment, which I think there's a public forum going on right now, probably while we're in this meeting. And there's a lot of legwork required that we haven't actually really had to deal with in the past, because we're trying to take a more active approach in managing our affordable housing needs for the town. And I support the committee's request. Michael Runyon, Select Board Member Runyon, is also on the Housing Partnership, and when we recently reviewed building department fees, we thought that that was a pretty good correlation, where we're tearing down what is theoretically an affordable home and replacing it with probably a larger, more expensive home, and we felt as though that fee increase could be used to support this program.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, the Affordable Housing Revolving Fund has 1.1 million. Wouldn't that be an appropriate source to pay for this, or?
It could be, certainly, but what I would say is that, as a community, I think that if we are going to continue to generate affordable housing opportunities for the residents, that we should take sort of an active role in providing tax dollars to support it. In this case, not through taxes, but through an additional fee.
Right. I mean, this study could make a lot of sense. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying.
I just want to clarify, Brad referenced the study. The study's already been underway. They got grant funding for that. So that it's not related to the study. It's related to the administration of the programs.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is, why wouldn't we just have that extra demolition fees go to free cash and spend down some of the 1.1 million in the revolving account?
Theoretically, you could. Again, this is a funding plan to make it revenue neutral, and there's plenty of opportunities and plenty of needs on that funding in the future. I know that previously, town meeting had taken up the Affordable Housing Trust and sort of formalizing that part of our affordable housing operation. There's a state program there to provide those funds in a trust, a separate committee for the investment and the decisions on the housing, to provide some real on-the-ground flexibility. It's a town meeting vote. It was unsuccessful the last time. I think it was rushed through a little bit. It's going to take some time to get that through. But this is all part of the plan to sort of formalize the operation. But it's a long way of answering your question is if you requested to change the funding source, at town meeting, we could do that. I mean, I think that's a possible action that could be taken on the motion when it's made at town meeting.
You would be okay with that, or?
Well, again, I'm speaking on behalf of the partnership now. We probably want to get their opinion on it, but it certainly is a perfectly legal and allowable move if you so choose to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to John's idea, the demolition fee is coming out of the cost of creating a new property, right? You buy something, you demolish the house, you build a new one, you sell it, and you make your money. So we're not hurting anybody by getting revenues out of that demolition fee as an offset or a contribution to this. Taking money out of that essentially out of that trust fund. If anything, we would like to make that bigger because one of its key purposes is to acquire properties when they become available. So I would be, your argument would be, why don't we just raise the demolition fees and use that as a way to make the trust fund even bigger?
No, I was actually arguing the reverse, which is make free cash bigger and make the trust fund smaller.
Yeah, so I personally would not be in favor of that, because even though sometimes you don't like earmarks, letting this money flow to that purpose explicitly and doing no harm to the person that's doing the demolition seems like a better way to get it where we want it to go.
Well, if you don't count charging them $800 as harming them.
It doesn't. It goes into the cost of building the new thing. It doesn't harm them.
Well, I don't think we can pretend a fee is zero.
They wouldn't do it if it wasn't economical.
It's adding to their cost, obviously.
It adds $800 to the final cost of the house.
Sure.
Maybe.
The buyer who suffers.
Somebody's losing $800. I'm not saying I have a problem with it, but we shouldn't pretend that no one's losing it.
But not the taxpayer.
Just that one taxpayer.
Next year's taxpayer.
I guess I'm confused why we use a flat rate fee when looks like Lexington does $12 per 1,000, Woburn does $15 per 1,000, Billerica does $8 per 1,000 for demolition, and just looking at our surrounding towns, and I think, I'm just projecting here, but the idea is the reason we wanted to increase the demolition fee is to discourage the ripping down of $600,000-$700,000 homes and putting up $1 million mansions potentially. I don't know, I'm just projecting, but my question then is why aren't we having a competitive demolition fee to what some of our surrounding towns are doing when looking at tax revenue? If they're actively going after fees, revenue, why are we not being as competitive?
Paul?
I haven't seen that structure on the demolition permits, Chris, but I can say that over the course of time, I think what the town's goal on fees was to sort of be in the middle of the pack of our neighbors. And again, obviously with the flat fee, we have a little bit of different structure than those communities. But I think the goal has always, the message we've always been and what we've strived for was to not to be the highest around. Obviously, we don't want to be the lowest around either, but to try to be someplace in the middle. And that's where the building department shot for with their rate increases.
What is the process for the rate setting for that? Is that just a selectman or select board vote?
Yes, it was approved by the select board.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Rob. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Gaia?
Yes.
Rob? John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 13-0. And finally, 119 South Bedford Street.
So this should be reasonably fast. This actually is an FYI and perhaps more work on the chairman's plate, but so for Article 28, 119 South Bedford Road, the issue here is that a deed-restricted affordable housing unit at this location is up for sale. So there are three possible options that the select board has for dealing with this situation. One of the three possibilities require the town having enough money to purchase the home. So, Board of Selectmen, the select board has not, didn't get around to voting it this past Monday. They'll be voting on it the night of the first town meeting, that Monday night. In trying to think how to, so if they do go with that third option, this committee probably would want to weigh in, but it is Article 28. We'll probably have time to address it before Wednesday's town meeting. But given the quantum state that this is in, the subcommittee did not take a vote.
Got it.
Dollar value?
The House is what, 340?
And the source of funding would be?
The housing trust.
So that's my point, John.
Well, I'm just,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, you didn't recognize either one of us, so.
Yeah, you can quickly respond.
well, that was actually my exact question, because it in the warrant article, it gives raise and appropriate, transfer from appropriate funds, or otherwise provide the sum. Why isn't it just from the housing trust?
That's typically how the warrant articles are written, to provide flexibility as we go through the process, and the funding source is officially defined here with the committee and within the motion that's provided to the moderator to read at town meeting. So the motion that the moderator would read to transfer from available funds, Affordable Housing Trust.
In particular, it would be that affordable housing revolving fund?
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's certainly, if I were to make the motion, that's what I'd do, because that's the whole point of that fund. And the more money we have in it, the more acquisitions we can do for affordable housing. So that's my point.
I'm fine with this one.
So this one is stay tuned, and we'll probably have a quick meeting the Wednesday night of town meeting, the first Wednesday.
Is it likely to come up?
I don't believe it's gonna come up on the first night. That's for sure.
Oh, I see.
Unless we're doing record time.
What's the delay?
If not, I can work with the moderator to make sure that it doesn't come up until that Wednesday.
operating budget first.
Go ahead.
No, why can't we vote it now?
Well, because you don't know if it's an option that going forward that they're gonna do this.
So let them withdraw it. Why can't we just vote on it?
You know, if we, I think we could vote it. It may not be necessary. The only question would be what kind of an amount would we put in it? And,
We don't have a not to exceed amount?
I mean,
We do, there's a maximum amount.
we could think that up, and then we could
I
vote
would
it.
suggest, Mr. Chairman, we take it as a warrant article, not to exceed, source of funding from the trust fund, and just vote it. And if it's withdrawn, it's withdrawn.
Yeah.
Right? Am I screwed up here?
No, I guess I would say the only wrinkle is with these homes is one of the things that we would have to evaluate is how much work would need to be done to it in order to put it up for resale. And that's something we just don't have accurate numbers. We anticipate it will be $100,000 at a minimum. So I think there's an agreed upon price that we could buy it back as affordable. And this will be part of the select board's decision-making. Can we get it back out on the street in an affordable state as well? And that's, again, that's sort of the trick to this. We did one of these recently, which is actually the house next door, 117 South Bedford. But on that particular case several years ago, the negotiated price that we got to purchase the home for was $150,000. And we were able to ask town meeting for $250,000 of the housing funds, so 150 to buy it and 100 to renovate it. We're still able to turn around and sell that house, you know, and sort of break even on it. And money goes back into the Affordable Housing Trust. We're not sure if the numbers work to allow us to do that this time. So that would be my only hesitation. I'm not opposed to your course of action with a not to exceed. We could certainly always go back and ask for additional renovation funding if we needed to, if you wanted to get it taken care of.
Oh, they
tonight.
wouldn't do the deal if the price is ridiculous.
But certainly, what you suggest is an option I just wanted to throw out there. That's sort of we know how much under the affordable housing laws that we will have to pay for the home. What we don't know is how much money we may need to put into it to put it in a position to provide for another affordable buyer.
I don't care, Mr. Chairman, I was trying to avoid a mad scramble on, Monday or Wednesday night.
Yeah, Megan had a question, but I'll entertain a motion afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How did the the Affordable Housing Committee vote on this?
They voted 5-1 against purchasing it. They're an advisory board to the select board, so that's what we're waiting for, is for that recommendation to go to the select board. And we don't pick when people decide to sell their homes, so these things tend to come at us pretty quickly once we're notified. We have a set period of time in order to make a decision to the homeowner.
What
So
was
that's-
the reason for the negative vote?
Again, the reasons I just stated, is it financially viable? I don't know exactly what the individual members' perspectives were, but, these are types of homes that we want to have in our affordable inventory. They're older style military homes that, probably needed a lot of work anyway, and are these a good situation to put folks in if, they just may be able to meet the affordable requirements to buy the home, and then, the roof goes, 2 months later and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of different reasons why a person could have voted to not pursue this option, but ultimately it belongs to the select board to decide.
So if we picked them out, we would have to guess at the cost of renovation, because you'd really like to do it in one vote.
Right, you got
And we don't have
acquisition and renovation, add them up, you get a number. If we get the number wrong, if the number doesn't fit, they'd withdraw it anyway. If we make it not to exceed, I don't know. It's really up to you, Mr. Chairman, I don't care one way or the other, just trying to make it easy.
To me, it feels like we don't have enough information to make an educated vote. Like, you could do a not to exceed, and especially in light of the negative vote, it's kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah. We all have to show up at town meeting, showing up half an hour early to have a vote on this.
Well,
is
especially
fine.
if you want to be able to just go to the town's clerk's office and sign your name if you want to rerun as a town meeting member, rather than having to get 10 signatures.
What makes you think we're up for reelection? Nice try, Steve.
I'm just saying. Yes, everyone
I'm
does,
just saying.
everyone does have to be at town meeting
Wow.
on Wednesday night, so.
Well, though it's hybrid, so not everybody will be.
That's right, so we would have a risk of.
So you want a motion to table till time certain on this?
Yes, let's have a motion for time certain to.
So moved.
Motion, okay.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Do we need?
Ed and Jaya, do you have any objections? Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go, guys. There was one other item
We're at the
on
best
there.
part.
We're at the best part. This is the one that John's been waiting for. Discussion of revolving account balances.
I'm not sure I'll have any answers, but most of them are handled by the department, but I'm happy to try.
Any questions, John?
Why, yes. It's my favorite topic.
Remember, it's 10:20. You have a 7 a.m. meeting, don't you?
Morning.
I'll be my usual snappy self. You quick one. The Simon's Trust, is that account where the money goes when we accept money from the Simon's Trust, or is this something else?
Yes, that's where the money goes when we accept it.
Because it's.
I have my copy with me.
This one? 234. Okay.
Because it's accumulated $234,000. I was always the impression that we were spending the money that we accepted from the
Remember, he
Simons.
said that they didn't spend last year's money yet, because
Yeah,
they're gonna
but-
combine it with this one.
But how much are we getting each year, like 70K?
140K.
Oh, was it 100?
Usually about 70,000 per reading.
Oh, per reading.
But it's the same.
No, it's only 170,000.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
is it only
like-
170?
So if it's like 70,000 a year, we've accumulated like 3 years' worth of money, is that,
I think you'd have to ask what projects they haven't done.
okay, does that make sense to you though?
And the only other thing I'll add is I think the previous years may have been a little bit more. I think they were giving us too little, and then the trustee people said, you gotta start spending more of this money, so for a period of time, they started providing us with more funding, so.
Okay, so our spending is catching up to the funding on that, okay.
Can I just ask a quick question on this? So when we do 2 readings of the will, we're usually voting on 2 different numbers, and they're in the $70,000 range each. So then how does that always end up to just be 70,000 a year?
It should be the same number.
Should be the same number.
It should be, but we voted twice, one.
Yeah, if there's a strange provision of the will that requires it to be read twice at town meeting, believe it or not.
And don't forget to say, thank you, Simon's Trust, we
And
appreciate
the
your
amounts
support.
can vary significantly depending on the distribution of the will.
They have investments.
Year to year, but not
Year to
reading
year.
to reading.
Right.
Year to year.
All right, I need to.
That's fine.
No, thank you for clearing
get to
up that
interrupt whenever
mystery.
you want.
It wasn't clear to me. Thank you, the will of Marshall Simons.
Yes, thank you very much. The next one was sell cemetery lots. I assume that's going towards upkeep of the cemetery somehow, but it seems like we're not really spending out of that. So I was just curious what that's about.
Public Works plan with that is for cemetery expansion projects.
Okay, so they are saving that up for a project.
There's still talk about a few years ago, Frank switched the funding source and made them buy a backhoe out of there, so we weren't able to expand the cemetery for.
By the way, John.
Wouldn't catch me doing that.
We haven't been able to expand the cemetery for 15 years since then.
Yeah.
No problem here, no hard feelings either.
But we can dig a big hole for you.
Not that he holds a grudge or anything.
So the money from the sale of the lots and the columbarium goes in there, and it's available for cemetery-style projects. It's actually quite small. As you know, we don't have a large cemetery that was selling a lot of plots anymore, because we sort of ran out of space, and we have the columbariums now. So it's not a number that grows in a big way, but certainly we just had this conversation. I saw Doug nodding his head there. The goal is there that they have some areas and future plans for additional columbarium space at the cemetery, and the goal was to keep letting this fund build so that they could fund the project that way.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
And just one final last thing. Oh, sorry.
To be
Yep.
clear though, there's the sale of graves, but there's also the perpetual care.
Correct.
Which is separate.
Yeah.
So this doesn't care for the cemetery. It's operating, make more space, buy equipment, things like that.
I don't see perpetual care on here anywhere. Is that some other fund that's not on here, or?
It's not a revolving account.
It's the,
Well, this also has special accounts.
isn't it the operating
Is it,
budget?
wouldn't that be a special account? I don't know.
Go ahead.
It's a trust fund. I'm not sure where it is on the page.
So these don't have trusts or agency funds or grants on them, so.
Okay.
So when you
I haven't asked.
This is not what you asked for.
I need to ask more questions. All right, I do have one more question, and this isn't on here, but you can save trouble each year by putting it on here. The school has this circuit breaker carryover account, which for the first time happened in FY20 closeout. Not that I hold a grudge. And so I'm just curious, do you have the history of the balance on that? And mainly what I'm looking for is that this isn't a growing slush fund, as it were.
Something's wrong.
So it would be, the circuit breaker account has a limit. You can only carry over up to 1 year's revenues.
Okay.
Next year, so they wouldn't be able to just build it up.
Excellent. All right, so there's a mechanism that prevents that from building up. Great. Thank you.
And
I'm
would you
done.
like to
Thank you.
request that copies of the bank statements are forwarded to you as well?
That's next year.
The real
Okay.
rollover
You
goes
gotta
to the
keep them
general
waiting.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, finally, there's the minutes. There's just, thank you guys.
fund. Yep. 7 a.m.
Leaving already?
Yeah. Call John Isla just before you leave your house.
Move to approve the minutes of April 20th?
Second.
There's just one quick correction, is that Article 8 should read 1,090,873. I have a motion to approve in a second. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger? Yes. Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Gaia?
Abstain.
Thank you. Rob? John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 12:01. Does anyone want to leave?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
So next week is the final wrap-up of everything. So we'll do all the school warrant articles, the school assessments, the local education, and the special education accommodated account.
And a dozen capital items.
In the school warrant articles, yeah.
That shouldn't take long.
I'm glad I had DPW last week. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Steve.